Anyway, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Planning Committee. I'd like to welcome all the visitors and speakers. I'd also like to welcome Councillor Nicola Morris, who's sitting at the back, who's gone beyond the call of duty because she's broken her leg a week ago, and she's managed to come in with some help from her husband, he's probably having coffee somewhere. Oh, he's gone, right, okay. But welcome to you, and thank you for making the effort to come. Excellent. My name's Nicholas Wright, I'm chair of this committee, and we have two vice chairmen, Councillor Andy Dyke and Councillor Nick Dawkes. Let me introduce you to Amanda Lads, committee administrator, head of legal services, Heather Peachy, head of development management, Kieran Power, development manager Carl Brace, also planning officers Joan Desmond and Gemma Smith will be coming at some stage, and also assistant manager of South Worcestershire Land Drainage Partnership, Andrew Fell. Thank you all. Just to say that this is being webcast on YouTube, so you can watch it in comfort when you're going back home, or any time you like. And there also will be comfort breaks, depending on how we get on. Councillor Clatworthy will be joining the committee, but he's just otherwise engaged on an important phone call, so he will probably appear. Thank you very much. Have we any apologies for absence? Mandy, thanks.
Chairman, I've had apologies for absence from Councillors Linda Robinson, Emma Kersey, Dan Birch, Hannah Robson and Emma Sims. Substitutes, Councillor Mark Goodge is substituting for Councillor Kersey, and Councillor Paul Middleborough is substituting for Councillor Birch. Thank you.
Thank you. Just for the members of the public and speakers, we don't normally get this quantity of apologies, but unfortunately today is the start of the County Council, the latest County Council recruitment today and meeting. So those members, 4 of those members are engaged, unfortunately, on that. But we have got some very good substitutes, 2 of them. Do have a seat. Thank you. Have any declarations of interest?
Chairman, for item 7, Councillors Rob Adams, Paul Middleborough and Margaret Rowley have declared a non-pecuniary interest. The Speaker, Neil Pearce, is a former planning officer at the Council. Thank you.
Are there any other declarations of interest from the panel? No? Thank you very much. You've all had the minutes of the last meeting on the 24th of April. There are a couple of corrections. Mandy, could you just say what those are?
Chairman, in minute 107 relating to the declarations of interest, in point 1 it should read Councillor A. Al Dyke and not Councillor R.C. Adams. And in minute number 113, Councillor Adams has highlighted that the references to the B484 and B484 should be the B4084. Thank you.
Give or take the odd 0. Can I take that as a true record of the meeting? Could I have a proposal, Councillor Dawes, seconded by Councillor Adams? Thank you very much. Thank you. And I've said all this before, and to most people who've been to these planning committees, but basically planning is a balance, and I'm afraid some of the decisions aren't necessarily what you want to hear. But we do our best in the planning committee, having considered all the options. There's a great pressure, as you know, on building houses. We have a housing supply, not a 5-year housing supply, in Wychavon about 1.1, or maybe, give or take. And this isn't the fault of Wychavon. They've always been consistently above targets producing it, but unfortunately we don't go backwards, we look forwards. So it does make the pressure quite considerable on officers and on the committee. And I make this point because the National Planning Framework is engaged, obviously, this is what we can, and its decisions should apply in presumption in favour of sustainable development. And this fact we haven't got a housing supply is a crucial part of the decision making at the moment. And I just mention that because it comes up at every single time. And if you've read the committee reports, if you've read the websites, then you'll see it all on every single application. This is where we are. So apart from the National Planning Framework, we have the officers look at South Worcestershire Development Plan, which a new one hopefully will be produced at the end of this year. Supplementary planning documents, neighbourhood plans, relevant decisions of the Secretary of State, all these things, and loads more, which are itemised on the case officer's reports in about 3 or 4 paragraphs, and there's a considerable amount, before it comes to the committee for decision making. That's where we are. So your attention is drawn to the advice notes to applicants and public, where it states that where updates have been received before the planning committee's meeting, a written summary of these is published generally by 5 o'clock on the day prior to the committee meeting. For those who have spoken before, if you're a member of basically you have 3 minutes to speak if you're speaking today. 3 minutes for the parish council, 3 minutes for those objecting to the application, 3 minutes for those in support. And if you go over 3 minutes, I'm afraid we'll stop you. If there's 2 of you speaking, I'm not sure whether there is. No, I don't think there is this afternoon. There could be, the last one. Then you have 3 minutes between you. And if you haven't been before, it's fairly simple format. Planning officer will explain the application. Parish council will be invited to speak, then the objector, then the applicant or agent, and then the ward member can ask questions, as can the committee, of anything that's just to clarify any points. And then it's open to the ward member to speak, and then it's open to debate before a vote is taken. Okay. Thank you. So we'll move quickly on to item 7, which is planning application 24/01001, land to the north of Wychavon Road, Pershore. This is an outline planning permission application with all matters reserved for 31 dwellings. And I'd like to ask, first of all, excuse me a minute. We have 2 speakers, Councillor Benny Carr from Wychavon Parish Council and Mr. Neil Pearce. Councillor Carr, would you like to come to the front? Do you want? Thank you. Thank you very much. There we are. I'd like to ask Chair Desmond to summarise this application. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. This is an outline planning application with all matters reserved except for access for 31 dwellings, including 12 affordable dwellings, landscaping and associated infrastructure. This shows the site just in relation to the overall district, and the red star is where the site is, so it's at Pershore. This is an aerial view of the site. And the red star again identifies the site. So you've got Wire Road to the south, you've got Pershore High School to the north of the site with its playing fields backing onto the site, and then you've got residential development to the west and south of the site. This is the site location plan, so the site is edge red. This is taken from the structure plan, the South Worcestershire Development Plan Review, which looks at the proposed allocations in that review. So the application site is this site here, north of Wire Road. The application members are aware also includes this sort of wooded areas outside the allocated site, and across the road, just for members' reference, is another site which you'll be considering later on in the schedule. This is an illustrative site plan which has gone through some amendments following discussions with the urban design officer. So the woodland area is to be retained, as has always been the case. You've got a public right-of-way which isn't affected by this development, running north to south. And then the main change has been this wooded area here, and along the northern boundary has been retained at the request of the landscape officer. And as a result of that, the actual overall number of units was reduced from 35 to 31. And as I say, it is an illustrative plan which just shows sort of how you would be able to accommodate the quantum of development on the site with that frontage form of development. And this is an illustrative street scene which indicates when the reserved matters application is submitted, that the majority of houses would take the form of two-storey development with a mixture of materials to reflect local character. And this is the access details, because I say access is included as part of this application. So there is an existing access, as members saw this morning on the site visit, and that is going to be the access which serves the development with appropriate visibility displays provided. And what follows just a series of photographs of the site. So the first one is a view of the site looking northeast. And that's a view of the site looking back towards the housing on the southern side of Wyre Road, so looking west. And finally, that's a view of the site looking east towards the that wooded area, which is proposed to be retained as part of this application. So in terms of the application, the site does lie outside the defined settlement in the South Worcester Development Plan and lies within a designated significant gap. And the proposal therefore does conflict with policy SWDP2. Nevertheless, the site is a draft allocation in the development plan review for up to 28 houses. Members are also aware that the council cannot currently demonstrate a 5-year supply of deliverable housing sites, and as such the council's policies for the supply of housing are out of date, and the tilted balance as set out in the MPPF is engaged. The site is located on the edge of the town with good accessibility options to a range of facilities and services, and in terms of the social benefits, the proposal would positively support the delivery of housing, including affordable housing. In economic terms, the proposal would provide construction jobs and local investment. And in terms of the environmental dimension, there would inevitably be some degree of landscape harm by virtue of developing a greenfield site, and the development would encroach into a significant gap. However, the allocation of this site for housing within the development plan review was supported in principle from a landscape perspective, and the 2022 significant gap appraisal also considered this gap to be too small to effectively serve to differentiate between the settlements of Pershaw, Pinvin and Wyre. The harm to the landscape would therefore be very localised and minor in nature. The proposed quantum of development could be accommodated on the site with an appropriate layout design secured at the reserved matters stage, and there are no technical objections raised to the development. As referred to in the committee update, additional ecological surveys have now been completed, and an ecological impact assessment report concludes that the recommended mitigation strategies to safeguard the status of protected and notable species on the site can be secured via condition. The BNG metric is also being updated following the revisions to the site layout, and the agent believes that this will have a positive effect on the BNG calculation. So with the tilted balance engaged, it's considered that the harms identified would not significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits of the scheme, and therefore the proposal would represent sustainable development and is recommended for approval subject to the Section 106 agreement and the conditions as detailed in the report, with any additional further BNG conditions as required by the Ecology Officer. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Pennycar, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
I'm a councillor at Wyre Parish Council, but obliged to speak personally today. I'm objecting to this proposal for 4 reasons. Firstly, more houses, more cars, more traffic at the station road traffic lights, which are already a bottleneck. Secondly, more houses, more people, more wee, more poo, more sewage than Severn Trent are unable to treat when it rains, more pollution in our precious River Avon. Thirdly, more houses, more surface water runoff. Whatever you do with suds and retention basins, inevitably more water in the Piddle Brook, more flooding in Wyre and Pershaw and Tewkesbury and beyond. Fourthly, this development is on a significant gap. It protects the villages of Wyre and Pinvin from becoming enveloped in the suburban sprawl of Pershaw. The SWDPR 20.4 lists as an objective to maintain open landscapes and to prevent the merging of settlements. Previous plans acknowledged the importance of this green space by designating it a significant gap, but the significant gap appraisal has now decreed that the gap is no longer significant. This is wrong. There are only 3 green spaces which currently visually separate Pershore town from the village of Wychavon. This application relates to one of them. The 94 houses on the other side of the road that you'll consider later relate to the second, and the third is also the subject of a current planning application. The character of the 2 settlements are very different. Wychavon is an ancient riverside village with over 20 listed buildings, a conservation area, and 2 scheduled ancient monuments, completely different to the urban creep of North Pershore. These 3 green spaces should be preserved. In Wychavon we have a problem because Wychavon village is not in the middle of Wychavon parish. It's on the western border, which means that all the green spaces which protect our village lie outside our parish, and we therefore have no jurisdiction over them. So we have to trust the continued existence of Wychavon as a discrete community to you, the planners. The significant gap appraisal is a betrayal of that trust. It is clear that the only criterion affecting the outcome is the size of the gaps. The large gaps, predominantly in Malvern and around Worcester, are retained. The small gaps, predominantly in rural Wychavon, are all abandoned. These significant gaps, including those protecting Wychavon and Pinvin, are to be removed because, I quote, "the gap is small and any further reduction in size would limit its purpose." This is preposterous. Please do not build on our significant gaps and protect our green spaces. To do so is a breach of the objectives of the SWDPR and a betrayal of the trust that the rural parishes put in you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Neil Pierce, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you today. As you've heard, this is an allocated site in the South Worcestershire Development Plan Review, adjoining the development boundary of Pershore and surrounded by existing developments. The proposal is in outline with all matters reserved with the exception of access for up to 31 dwellings, 12 of which will be affordable homes. An illustrative layout has been submitted which provides a significant level of detail and demonstrates how the development is likely to come forward with a high-quality landscape-led design. The illustrative layout has been amended, as you've heard, following negotiations with your officers to a level where it is practically suitable for a detailed consent. It represents over 40% green infrastructure and all the trees, including the oak, are now to be retained. In light of the Council's current housing land supply, the principle of the release of this emerging allocation early is supported by your officers under the correct application of the tilted balance. The site is not affected by any planning constraints or footnote 7 designations that would represent a strong reason for refusing planning permission. There are very limited adverse impacts resulting from the development, and these would significantly and demonstrably be outweighed by the economic and social environmental benefits, which are set out in section 7.11 of the report. I note the comments from the Wychavon Parish Council in respect of the implications for the significant gap. Regardless of this application, this council has endorsed the removal of the significant gap designation, and by doing so the allocation of land for housing, which this application site forms part of. The evidence and justification behind this decision is set out in the significant gap appraisal of 2022. The appraisal concludes that given the committed development to the south of Wyre Road, it is not reasonable to retain the gap since it no longer serves as a means of separation between the 2 settlements. As outlined in your officer's report, there are no technical objections to the proposed development and very little public opposition. Please consider favourably this proposal and grant planning permission subject to the Section 106 agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pierce. We have 3 board members of that area, Councillor Boatwright Green, Councillor Arnold, Councillor Tucker. I know Councillor Boatwright Green is engaged with county matters today, and I think we have Councillor Tucker here as a representative of that ward. Have you any questions at all to ask, to clarify for you, Councillor Tucker?
Thank you, Chairman. I don't know if this is directly relevant, but local members were expecting a full application on this site at this stage, and I'm just wondering why it's not a full application.
As opposed to an outline application? Yes. Would you like to just answer that one? Yeah.
Well, there's no obligation on an applicant to make the full application, and an outline application is a legitimate application to make, and in the context that the allocated site is still in the emerging plan, in this instance an outline application makes sense from the fact that we're in that position between the two plans. So it's a legitimate application to make it in that context, but it'd be a legitimate application to make it anyway. If the plan was adopted, it's not unusual for allocated sites to first be advanced through an outline application.
Thank you. Have we any other questions or to clarify from the speakers from the rest of the committee? Councillor Morris.
And my apologies if this was discussed this morning, but part of this is in the development plan. Are we able to see on the application? I just wanted to know whether there's any relevance between what is in the allocation and what isn't.
Quite sure what you mean by that.
Right, well, it's in the SWDPR, isn't it? There's part of the site is, and I was just interested to see whether we can be shown visually what that looks like. I mean, sorry if it's...
Thank you. Jen.
Yeah, I can clarify that. So this slide shows the allocation. So the brown is the allocation. The application site includes, I don't see members, this sort of slightly greyed area here, which is the existing woodland, which is proposed to be retained. So the actual housing development is on the allocated site, but it does include within the application site this woodland area, as I say, which would be retained and undeveloped.
Right, okay, that sounds really positive to me, unless I'm misreading that. No, it is positive. Yeah, I did have another question, which was, I'm picking up on the concerns on the significant gap, and I'm not fully aware of what happens with neighbourhood plans, but, you know, moving forward, is there a possibility that you can have like an open green space in a neighbourhood plan which would retain some of what is being lost, and my understanding of that is legally can be quite a robust way of maintaining what is concerning the parish councillors?
Yeah.
A neighbourhood development plan is an effective tool to make those sorts of allocations. However, a neighbourhood development plan does have to be in conformity with the local plan to which it relates. So in this instance, if we were rolling forward, clearly this is an allocated site. So a strategic gap allocation in NDP would not be in conformity with the local plan to which it relates. Now that designation could apply to that retained tree area that Jonas talked you through, and that could be formalised, but as I say, to a greater or lesser degree, it is protected through this application process through both the outline and subsequent emerging reserve matters.
Any other questions at all? Councillor Tourier?
Thank you. I'm not sure whether this is relevant at the moment, but talking about the woodland that you've got, I understand it's going to be enclosed, so it's not going to be used as a sort of an open space by the residents, and also I can't see a play area there, and again I'm not sure if this is to be brought up now or not.
Jen.
Thank you. Yes, initially the woodland area was supposed to be part of the open space, but there were concerns raised by the landscape officer and the ecology officer about the disturbance in terms of that woodland and its habitats. So we've looked at that to say that we actually prefer that to be not used or that the public won't easily be able to access that woodland area. So that's why the site's been amended to have a public open space along that northern boundary and the retention of those trees. So it's intended that would be principally the open space and some on the western part of the site. As I say, this is an outline application, and the agent has indicated that they are willing to put a local area play on the site, but the exact location of that is yet to be agreed. That would be subject, as I say, to consideration at that reserve matters stage.
Councillor Rani?
Now totally confused. Do I understand that that is part of a remaining part of the strategic gap, or has the strategic gap disappeared altogether?
Well, it's all part of the review process that's going on at the moment, which has allocated this site for housing. And as part of that allocation, in addition to that, a review was done in 2022 looking at significant gaps. And that appraisal, it was felt that the significant gap no longer functioned in the way it did in terms of its size was too small, so actually didn't function as a significant gap. So that was related to then the site being suitable for housing, which is, as I say now, an allocation in that review process. So if that review goes through with the site being allocated, obviously its function as a significant gap will also end.
Got an open space area there.
Yes, I mean, 40% of the site will meet your policy in terms of green infrastructure, and a large part of that would be the open space provision.
Any further clarification points? No? Thank you. Well, thank you, speakers, for coming. And would you like to return to your seats? Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Tucker, would you like to address the committee?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Well, as I asked the question why we were looking at an outline application as opposed to a detailed application, the reason I asked that is because this site has been on the cards for development for many years. I well remember how the owner of the site put in a surface water drainage connection across the road when the housing site opposite was being developed. And I thought at the time, aye, we know what you want. And that wasn't meant as a negative comment. It was, as Mr. Trump would say, it was a smart move. So this site has been allocated, as you say, in the SWDPR, and it has been brought forward at this point. Whether it should have been left until the adoption of the SWDPR is not a matter for me. But there are a number of comments that I have to wish to make. First of all, I'm glad that to see so much of the area excluding the tree copse being retained as open area. When we, as local members, visited the site, we were quite concerned about the erosion of the northern boundary there and removal of trees in that boundary. And I can see that quite a lot has now been retained, and I hope that in the detailed application we will see even more being retained. I've always had a query and a concern about the footpath which is shown on the right-hand side of the development between the housing and the copse area. There's a footpath which goes up to the northwest, up into the industrial estate, and it is very much enclosed, and I would say that it's actually quite unsafe. It doesn't really lead anywhere unless you're prepared to wind your way through the industrial estate and past industrial buildings and upstairs and things like that. So I'm glad to see that it hasn't been proposed as a significant access from the development, and that the route that is suggested for going, for instance, to the station is along the combined footpath and cycleway, which runs along Wire Road and then up Station Road, because that is obviously a much safer access. I have a question actually regarding the sports contribution. It is referred to in the report as relating to the leisure centre, but also relating to the Pershore High School, to the 3G pitches at the Pershore High School. And I'm not quite sure which we're talking about, but it does refer to both. Perhaps that's a question that could be answered in a moment. One of the main concerns that residents in the area have is the significant and fairly persistent odour which comes from the Severn Trent pumping station, sewage pumping station, to the southwest corner. This has resulted in many complaints to Severn Trent, from the housing estate opposite. And as you can see, because I think it's the white square or the white rectangle in the bottom right left-hand corner, is very much closer to the new proposed development. And I can foresee, unless something is clearly done about this, and I do believe it is something which should be covered by conditions. I know it would have to come forward at a detailed stage, but now is perhaps the time to address it. We do really need something done to ensure that there will not be significant odour nuisance for all houses in the area, but particularly the new development. Pleased to see that there are a number of bungalows suggested on the site, and all I can say is I'd like to see more. Local residents are very concerned about the developing traffic on the highway there, the Wire Road, and the speed of traffic. We know that it is, there's an area of limited, a national speed limit, and then it goes into a 40 mile an hour, then it goes into 30 mile an hour. And I really would like to see if it's possible to have the 30 mile an hour speed limit extended. I don't know whether this is something which we can refer to here, but it is, as traffic develops and as this housing estate would be developed, it does increase the safety risk on that road, and it is really ripe for an extension of the 30 mile an hour speed limit. Finally, I'd just like to have it confirmed that the detail for this application will come back to the committee in due course. Thank you. If it is approved, of course.
Thank you very much, Councillor Tucker, for those comments. I'll open it for debate of everybody. So, can I have anybody like to say something? You might have broken your leg, but you haven't lost your voice, Councillor Morris. Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleasantly surprised that quite a lot of thought's gone into this. It's not that I don't understand the residents' concerns. I think, again, we're being told that residents need to be a lot more proactive in terms of their neighbourhood plan. So I'm flying the flag for Councillor Kersey. But I do think that we are where we are, and we have got a problem. And if communities don't get to be more proactive in terms of their neighbourhood plans, there is very little that we can do in order to reduce effectively the housing development from communities. But I think doesn't mean that we can't, as Councillor Tucker has mentioned, make sure that the details are improved. So I would echo the thought that I can't see that there are reasons why we should reject this application, but obviously I want to hear what my colleagues say. But it is as it is. It looks as good as it can be, but we need to make damn sure that it's properly conditioned and that the relevant concerns that have been raised by residents are taken into account in terms of making this the best possible development it can be. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Morris. Councillor Dawkes.
Thank you, Chair. I'd largely echo Councillor Morris's comments. What we've got to bear in mind here is it is an outline planning application, not a full one. So there is little we can do to object to this at all. So I'd like to recommend approval in line with the officer's recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Dawes. Sorry, I thought you had your hand up, Councillor Middleborough. Councillor Dyke. Oh, so you did have your hand. Sorry, Paul. Councillor Middleborough.
Thank you. Just following on from Councillor Dawkes. One, it's in the SWDP. It's outline. And I do notice today that Pershore Town Council have not attended to speak at this meeting, and it is within the boundary of Pershore Town Council area. And I think Councillor Tucker has rightly mentioned the question of the foul smell from the sewage plant there, and I hope that that can be moved forward in terms of conditions before any houses are actually built on here. So I would second the officer's recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Middleborough. Councillor Dyke. That's a good way of getting out of it. Any further comments? Yes, Councillor Gooch.
Thank you. I'm perfectly happy with the recommendation to approve this. This does illustrate a little bit some of the technical absurdity of some of our policies, given this is technically a greenfield site outside the development boundary, and yet it's entirely surrounded on all four sides by existing development. It has housing to the south and southwest. It has urban, industrial, commercial to the north, and the school to the northwest. And yet somehow it's still considered to be outside the development boundary, when in reality this is more like an infill site. I know this isn't relevant to the planning policy considerations, but it's something that would weigh on my mind when agreeing to support the recommendations for approving this. The only thing I will say is I entirely agree with Councillor Tucker's comments about the need to ensure that we properly address the issues with sewage and drainage when it comes back for the reserved matters application, and I hope that will be robustly addressed by our officers at the time.
Thank you, Councillor Gooch. No more comments? We've made a note of that last point you make, to bring it back and to look at the conditions attached when it comes back at reserve, if it's passed. No more comments? We have a proposal from Councillor Dawkes, seconded by Councillor Middleborough. Heather, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So, members, you're voting for approval as set out in the report and the update. So those in favour, please, if you could raise your voting cards. That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much, and thank you for those speakers. Thank you. If you wish to stay, you're welcome to hear the rest of this riveting afternoon, or you're free to go. But if you want to go, please go now. Thank you. Moving swiftly on to item 8, which is planning application 24/02461, Highfield at Houselaw Lane, Charlton, a change of use from agriculture, sport and existing business for light industrial and ancillary office. And we have 3 speakers: Councillor Roger Davis from Charlton and Parish Council, Mrs Helen Hill and Ms Helen Donnelly. If you'd like to come forward and sit at the front, thank you. And we just got to find the case officer, who's probably thinking we've done it too quickly, the first item. So if you can just hold on a minute, we'll interrupt a cup of coffee and drag General along. Thank you very much. We'll just hang on a minute. You could talk amongst yourselves. We didn't know case officers had such a long lunch. But anyway, welcome to Gemma Smith, who's going to outline this application once she's set up. Do you want a few minutes to set it up, Gemma? Oh, you're right. Over to you.
Thanks, Chair. So item 8 is Highfield, Hazel Lane. It's a change of use from agricultural to support an existing business for light industrial, which is class EG3, and ancillary office, which is class EGI, including vehicle circulation and a new scheme of native landscaping. So the site plan, so here is the site and context with the red star, those members who came this morning, and the site plan. So the site plan at the top there with the red line round, and the aerial photography, and the site and context with the adjacent site at Upper Hazel Farm to the south of the site. So that's here in blue. This is the adjacent site that came to committee last November. It was for a catering company and also for a refusal of storage at this part of the site. And that's pending an appeal at the moment, which is detailed within the officer's report. Members may recall that Upper Hazel Farm was heard at Planning Committee in November with regards to siting of catering equipment. The wider site had been pending an enforcement complaint for the siting of unauthorised machinery and engineering works related to the applicant of this application being heard today in the agenda. By the committee updates yesterday, I had made aware that there was some storage within one of the buildings on the site, and there's some information within that update about compliancing. So the application before us is for, on here, on the proposed site plan. So we've got 3 main components, which is the workshop building here, the access, which is different to the adjacent Upper Hazel Farm site, a small part of open storage, a former cow shed to be used for B8 storage use, and an existing mobile prefab building which has an agricultural occupancy on it, which will be changed into an office and reception area. There'll also be a washdown area here, and there's also an acoustic barrier which will go in, which is advised as part of the noise assessment. Orchard planting is also proposed here to the site and on the eastern part here, and that's for biodiversity enhancement. This is a superseded site layout, so this is how the application was presented originally, showing a larger area of open storage here in part of the field parcel. That's been negotiated to remove, and obviously this is a scheme that we're looking at today. Some quick existing floor and elevation plans of the 3 buildings and the proposed elevations. There's very limited alterations to the buildings as part of these changes of use. And like I say, the acoustic measures will be put in primarily into the former poultry building here, which is advised within the noise mitigation report. There's some photographs of the site showing the buildings present. So looking east towards Hazel Lane, we've got the access here on the left with one of the buildings, which is the former poultry, to be the light industrial workshop. Again, on the right here in the photograph slide. Towards the bottom, we've got looking west, that's towards the prefab mobile home building and the cow shed on the left, which will be used for B8 storage. And looking west, which would have been part of open storage within part of the field. There's some more photographs. So looking south here on the left, that's the former cow shed on the right, which will be used for B8 storage. And there'll be on the left here an acoustic barrier. And this is the existing access. So there's some conditions for the existing access to be retained in visibility displays and also for bound material up to the access. So the officer's recommendation is one of approvals subject to conditions which relate to use class, operating hours of the washdown facility specifically, a personal condition to the business, ensuring the retention of the visibility displays and the bound surface materials, the noise mitigation measures to be implemented prior to the first use of the site, the details of the acoustic barrier, and removal of GPDO for those new buildings which could be permitted to other uses that we haven't assessed as part of this application. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Roger Davies, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, which I do on behalf of Charlton Parish Council, who object to this request. The application is for a Class EG usage of the property and barns at Highfield. This class of application is to allow uses which can be carried out in a residential area without detriment to its amenity. In this instance, we are considering two specific classes of that Class E. Firstly, EG1, offices to carry out operational or administrative functions, and EG3, which relates to industrial processes. Most crucially, in a decision from 2023 by Graham Dudley, an inspector, regarding an appeal concerning the use of this class for industrial purposes, he made the following comments. Class EG3 identifies an industrial process that can be carried out in any residential area without detriment to the amenity of that area by reason of noise, vibration, smell, smoke, soot, dust or grit, ash, and is for industrial purposes. Crucially, he stated, it is not a planning judgment on the individual case and location. It is a use that can be carried out in any residential area without detriment to the amenity. Therefore, it is important with any industrial process being applied for under this class to ensure that it can operate in any residential area and not just the one applied for. As a result, in determining this application, you must ask yourselves whether the application would be acceptable if it were to be based on a small vacant piece of land in the middle of a residential area. Would there be any detriment to amenity of that area by reason of noise, dust, vibration, etc.? This, of course, would include the need for the compactors to arrive and be taken away on HGVs. If there is any risk that the activities would be detrimental, then this application must be declined. In this instance, you are considering an application for a regional depot of the biggest independent waste equipment suppliers in the UK, with a group turnover in excess of 8 million annually, which is under the controlling ownership of American citizens. Given the nature of the business, which has successfully expanded over the last 40 years and will no doubt continue to do so, Highfield is really not a suitable location and certainly does not meet the requirements to be considered under the planning class applied for. We suggest the business should be based on a suitable business or industrial park where the activities would not be detrimental to the neighbourhood. On a couple of technical issues, we note that this application was referred to the landscape officer, but a copy of her report has not been made available. We also note that the officer states that Hazeler Lane is some 6 metres wide. It is not.
You got the last 3 words in, that was fine. Thank you very much, Councillor Davis. Mrs. Helen Hill, you have 3 minutes, thank you.
Good afternoon. I've got comments to read from 2 neighbours, 2 Upper Hazeler cottages, a neighbouring property to Highfield strongly object to this application. They have written, our biggest worry is the impact that the noise from the proposed workshop will have on our daily lives. We are retired, so we'll be home during the company's working hours. Our whole garden is to the rear of our home, where we spend a lot of time, and the workshop will be very close to us. Our rear boundary is closer to the workshop than the plans show. Despite the noise evaluation carried out, it was admitted that there was a level of uncertainty as this was a modelled situation. There is also no guarantee that during the summer months the roller doors will always be shut. If left open, the noise will travel. If granted, there will be no ongoing monitoring of the noise levels and we will have to live with the consequences. We are also concerned that the industrial wash plant will affect the water pressure to our house and indeed the whole lane. We feel that our home will become an island surrounded by industrial activity. We have the many vehicles from roly-poly eats travelling up the track immediately next to our garden, the view of the compacting machines directly behind our garden, and the workshop and washdown area on the other side. Applications for this company's activities in the vicinity of our home have been going on for months, and at times our mental health has been severely affected. We feel we are just ordinary people trying to protect our home and the open countryside of Hazeler Lane against the invasion of industrial activity. If permission is granted, it could open the floodgates for further industrial activity, affecting wildlife and providing no positive environmental benefit to Hazeler Lane. Surely there is a more suitable location for this company on a larger industrial site. And from neighbours at the bottom of Hazeler Lane, Mr and Mrs Mansell at Coppice Farm, we are concerned about the planning proposal to add to the connections to the current water supply servicing Hazeler Lane. We have a small holding at the Hinton, Elmley end of Hazeler Lane. We are at the end of the line for the water supply and our water pressure is poor. We rely on our supply to water our livestock as well as servicing the house. Any increased demand for water will inevitably reduce the pressure to our supply, especially at times of high demand. And I would comment that it shows the wrong location, the concerns for the water, and the scale is not appropriate to the location, contrary to SWDP 8E. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Helen Donnelly, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This proposed change of use is considered to accord with the relevant planning policy set out within the development plan and is therefore recommended for approval by your planning officer. Furthermore, there have been no statutory objections or technical objections. From the outset of this project at pre-app stage, we undertook a full analysis and understanding of the potential concerns of nearby residents of the proposed scheme, specifically potential noise and access. Consequently, the proposed scheme has been sensitively designed, resulting in no unacceptable environmental impacts. And we did send the full suite of documents to the Parish Council to give them the opportunity to comment on the development proposals before the full application was submitted, but they declined to provide any comments. The development proposals will result in a number of positive material planning benefits as follows. On rural employment, the proposed development will secure the future of an existing business and will support 8 full-time jobs for existing locally based staff, as well as local recruitment from the farming industry with transferable skills. The existing redundant farm buildings will be brought back into use without any extensions. The vehicular access will be the existing access from Hazeler Lane, which was granted permission in 2013. On landscape character, a robust scheme of landscaping is proposed to ensure the application site will be visually concealed from views in from the wider landscape with no impact on landscape character. With the combination of intervening buildings and proposed mitigation planting, there will be no change in visual impact as the proposed development will not be visible from existing public viewpoints or private residences. On biodiversity, a preliminary ecological appraisal, including walkover surveys, were undertaken by a qualified ecologist. No trees or hedgerows will be affected by the proposed development. Proposed new belts of hedging and trees and traditional orchards will introduce new habitat that will increase the overall net biodiversity value by at least 10%. On neighbouring amenity, the proposed development will not be visible from any neighbouring properties, and there will be no loss of amenity in terms of overshadowing, overbearing, or overlooking. On noise generation, a noise survey has been undertaken which identifies new noise sources as a result of the proposed development, with suitable mitigation measures to ensure appropriate and acceptable noise levels on nearby residents. Internal noise insulation measures are proposed within the proposed workshop building, and a 4-metre high acoustic barrier will surround the proposed washdown area. The operational hours will be office hours, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday to Friday only. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The ward member is Councillor Angie Crump, who's sitting over there. Have you any questions or clarification you want to ask, Councillor Crump?
Yeah, I've just got a couple of questions. Can I ask the agent? The first one is the noise impact assessment that was completed on the site, resulting in the requirement for the installation with the building to reduce the noise levels generated. Can you give examples of the expected sound and volume comparison that will be generated and the average percentage of the noise levels throughout the operational hours, please?
The noise consultant went to the existing depot in Tamworth for the company, and he took the noise readings of their existing operation there, so which was going to be similar to the proposed site. So that's the measure. That was the baseline measure.
And the other part was what's the sort of percentage of time that these noises are going to be in operation? I mean, you've got the operational hours. Is it going to be like continual, or is it small percentages of the time?
Well, it will be within operation hours, but not all of the time.
Have you any idea how much time? Or do you know? Do you know the answer to that one?
I'm afraid I can't be specific on that.
Anything?
Okay, other question. Basically, he's talking about the levels of the water being used when washing down, and how frequently, again, would this be in operation? Firstly, for the noise factor, because, you know, I know you've got the 4 metre boundary in place, but it's sort of, again, will this be a regular or frequent occurrence? And also for the challenge of the water pressure on the other properties. I appreciate that's not a planning issue, but it is an issue that the residents are going to have to deal with, because they've got to work with Severn Trent.
Yeah, I can be a bit more specific. I can be a bit more specific on that one. So the company are going to be refurbishing about 2 machines per month, and the washdown, there'll be 1 washdown per machine, so that's 2 washdowns per month. And also, I'd like to remind everyone as well that Highfield was up until recently a functioning farm, and farms also require lots of water. So in fact, I think there will be a reduction on the pressure on the water issue in terms of the pressure, because there won't be as much water used.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Crump. Any other points to clarify from the committee, Councillor Dawkes?
Sorry, Chair. 2 for Gemma, please. I couldn't find anywhere, so if you could help me on this one, are the trees that are going to be near this washdown area, have they been looked at by the TPO or anything? Are they going to be protected in this? Thank you.
The trees in the application area, there is no trees. I think it's outside of the red line.
Okay, thank you. That's fine then. And secondly, could you explain this EG3? Because I couldn't quite get the full grasp of this, and whether it's relevant to what we're looking at or not. Thank you.
So AGI is for light industrial uses. The alternative is obviously a general industrial use, which I think the agent is completely happy to obviously put forward, but this application is dealing with sort of light industrial uses, sort of mechanic and repair. So it's the information that's been submitted from the agent. It isn't, you know, doesn't go as far as B2 general industrial uses in the area. We've also got no objection from WRS in terms of the noise assessment. So given the fact that it's a light industrial use, that's what the uses are that's being, you know, discussed today and proposed as part of the use class order.
Thank you. Councillor Turrier.
Thank you. Question for Gemma about the sound. Have you had a record of the decibels sort of with and without the sound barrier? And have you checked it? Thank you.
I think Condition 8 now requires for those the detail, but in terms of the actual noise impact assessment, I think the details with the decibels, they're obviously within that table, I think it's number 25. But in terms of the acoustic barrier, we would require details and a detailed specification of that to ensure that there is no impact of noise externally on the nearest neighbouring receptors. So that's both obviously the occupant of Upper Hazelor Farm and also the cottages, which are a little bit further away.
Thank you. Councillor Dawes. Followed by Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Chair. This is for the agent, please. The neighbouring site had a planning refused, and that's now under appeal. Do you have anything to do with that application?
Yes, I'm the agent for both.
So if we were moved to approve this, would you revoke that appeal or would you continue with it?
It's slightly complicated because the enforcement action needs us to move the machinery within a certain time. So I'd have to discuss that with the client. But certainly if we do get this approval today, all of the machines will be moved from Upper Hazelor Farm.
But that doesn't mean you'll revoke the appeal?
I have to take advice from the client.
Okay.
Okay, Councillor Morris.
Yeah, and again, apologies if this was covered this morning. Is the proposal, a question for the agent, is the proposal to move the depot from Tamworth down to Highfield?
Now, the original Midlands depot was in Willersley, and that's closing, so they need to find a new location. But no, Tamworth will still remain their HQ.
Okay, that begs the question. The sound assessment was done at the Tamworth depot. Why wasn't it done at the Willersley one if that's the one that's going to be moved?
It's actually already closed.
And a question for Gemma. When an application comes in and the applicant has gone for a particular type of use, how much checking is done that they've actually applied for the correct class? I don't quite understand how it works. Do you actually check that what they're applying for is correct for how they want to use the site?
In what uses? Because there's 3 different uses on the site that's proposed here today. So it's obviously the light industrial, the B8 open storage, and obviously the B1 reception office ancillary.
It's more of a general thing. So how much do you actually check that what they're applying for is in line with how they intend to use it for each class?
Well, I guess it comes through from breach of planning control, doesn't it? So it's 3 complaints. Obviously, also, you've got to appreciate it's a bit wider, isn't it? I mean, I don't know whether anyone else wants to take this query.
Obviously, the description of the applications centres on what the proposal is. So if, I don't know, trying to think of something, often it's some sort of residential use in the other different use classes. We would just by nature of us in our job recognise if that complies, what is submitted in the submission documents tallies with the description. If it doesn't, we either proceed, refuse, or we go back and adjust and recommend an amendment to the description or query what has been submitted, basically. So it's generally things are either in accordance and there's no discrepancy between description and submission, or sometimes it might be more frequently from historical experience, you need to add a use class because of there might be an additional use in there that you might want to clarify. So in general, it's just almost an organic process in terms of through the registration stage, and our colleagues in support often might pick up a discrepancy, or when it comes to me in terms of signing off the validation process, picking up then, or if I've missed something or something that's embedded in some of the details, it's picked up by the case officer. So it's sort of a natural organic process, basically.
Thank you. Councillor Middleborough.
Thank you. A letter to the objector. How far away in yards or metres are the residential parts of the cottages that the people who you read out live from the boundary of the site?
Put your microphone.
Their garden borders onto the application site effectively. It's within sight of. So there's the 2 cottages at the end. It was number 2, not number 1. I was reading their comments out. They have also put an objection in. And the second people are actually further down the lane towards the Hinton Elmley end. So that's the end of the water line. So they're more impacted by the very low water pressure. It decreases as you go down the lane.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Medworth. Any more? Councillor Gooch. Councillor Adams. Councillor Gooch.
Yeah, this is a question for the officers, really. And I just like a little bit more clarity on this for myself. Dealing the other application that was on the adjacent site that was refused and is now at appeal. I know it's been raised already, but if that appeal was to be successful and we approved this one here, the applicants would then effectively end up with a site twice as big as they've actually asked for in either of the applications. Is there any way we can ensure that whichever of those is successful, they are restricted to just the one site?
Who'd like to take that one? Kieran.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, it would be quite difficult because of the. I appreciate the reasoning behind it. I think there is some mechanisms in terms of legal agreements that you could go into that you couldn't implement one permission without the other. But normally you've got the assurance that there's already been something granted, if that makes sense. So if that adjacent site had been granted and they came in to say, actually we prefer this site, we won't do both, then you could put a legal agreement that prevented implementation of both permissions. Because the decision hasn't been made on the appeal, we would be, I mean, what we would do normally, we would certainly update the inspector that this had been granted so that they're aware in consideration of the appeal that there'd already been an adjacent site granted to accommodate this. Touching a little bit on the enforcement matter, I suppose, just to, because we don't really get into enforcement much in planning committee, so just to explain a bit around how we've ended up there, and I suppose why the applicants have taken action at this point in time. The other planning application was obviously refused. Off the back of that, we've served an enforcement notice, and that requires them to essentially cease and remove the equipment within a period of time. If they don't comply with the notice, they're essentially in breach of the notice, and we could prosecute them. So there's no ability then to challenge the decision of the council to issue an enforcement notice. What the appeal does, it means it puts any further prosecutions on hold until such time as there's been a decision on that. And then the inspector is likely to amend the notice to reflect if they uphold the decision of the council to serve the notice, they'd amend it to allow a longer time for compliance. So that's how the enforcement side works, and that's in some ways in serving enforcement notices, it results in that reaction, just for clarification, really. So I think the best we could probably do is ensure that the inspector determining the current application considers what's been granted. Then it would potentially be open to the inspector to either consider whether a condition whether they're happy with both sites, whether they could seek a condition, or whether the applicants would want to try and address that through putting forward a different mechanism to say they'll only implement one, or it's also open to the applicants to potentially withdraw the appeal, subject to, we'd have to have a discussion, because ultimately if they withdraw and we don't agree a way forward, we'd be able to prosecute them, even though they might withdraw in good faith. So there's a bit of a discussion around that. But they're the sort of next steps. So I hope that gives some reassurance, although I appreciate it's not fully in the council's control.
Thank you. Councillor Adams.
You're losing me, Kieran. You're losing me. Let's try and get a little, because why I indicated to speak was because Councillor Dorks and now Councillor Googe are on the same sort of wavelength that I'm on. So I don't think anybody on this committee would like to see this, to have both applications approved on those sites. And therefore, when Kieran was speaking, it just went through my mind was how long would we have to wait for the inspector's decision on the appeal? So if it's only a few weeks away, surely we should defer this so as we know exactly where we stand.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. I think I better Kieran answer that one.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely if it's a short period of time, but I think ultimately we don't know when an inspector will make a decision on it. So it could be, it could be quite a length of time. The applicants obviously have the right of appeal against non-determination if we weren't to determine it. And I think in terms of sort of material planning considerations, there isn't an approval on the adjacent sites. There is an appeal in, but as it stands, there's a refusal there, and they're exercising their right to appeal. What would be material is for the inspector to consider what the impacts would be with both being granted, and that would be something that we would raise with the inspector in terms of this application that we're considering today. If it were to be granted, we'd be saying to the inspector, and we can the committee can resolve for officers to point out that we're not supportive of both, and actually we draw their attention to the fact the sort of greater impacts that it would have. Ultimately, the inspector would then weigh up the planning balance on that site, but I think that would be the correct way to do it, because ultimately, like I say, the material considerations is there is a refusal on the adjacent site, they're exercising the right for appeal. The inspector, as long as they're aware that we've granted this, they will take that into account in coming to their findings.
Can I come back, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I could go with that. I could go with that, and I move the officer's recommendation then to approve. On the understanding...
We haven't got to that stage yet.
Well,
sorry about that.
When I would do, I'm happy to do that.
Okay.
If somebody else.
Okay, thank you for that. And we'll keep that in mind in a minute.
And we will keep in mind what Kieran's saying about.
That's fine. Are there any more questions at all? It's Councillor Turier.
Yes, I'm slightly confused. I thought that we would have to wait until the enforcement was finished before it could then go to appeal on that site.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So the enforcement action's already been... So the council's already served an enforcement notice. That notice has been appealed by the applicants. So that is already at appeal. And the appeal relates to... if the appeal was allowed, it would essentially allow the development or on that adjacent site. But it isn't determined. So we're tasked here with considering it. It is difficult because ideally we'd have the outcome of that, and that would be neater. I fully appreciate that, but ultimately what's before us is a refusal adjacent, exercised a right of appeal. We don't know the outcome of that. We have an application in front of us. We have a statutory duty to determine within sort of agreed dates. If we make a decision today to approve, if committee make a decision to approve, then it would be a material consideration for the inspector considering that adjacent site at appeal, and that would be, from a council's perspective, it would be wholly reasonable for us to draw the inspector's attention to that matter, and also ultimately it backs up our case about saying we already didn't consider the adjacent site to be acceptable. This essentially with this as well is unlikely to be, it's even less acceptable, if that makes sense, because the harms would be greater. So I think we could strongly make that point, and I think we would point out that that's a matter that the planning committee were very clear in their reasoning this, and we've been asked to write from that perspective. And it's really then it's for the inspector to weigh up those material considerations at that point. But that's in terms of the order of how decisions would be made, that would be the correct order, really. I don't think it's not really open to us to sit on determining this, unfortunately, even though I do appreciate, like I say, that would be an ideal scenario. But I think the best case is to point out the material considerations that the inspector must have, and we can do that very quickly. So following this committee, even if the issue, I'm not sure if we'll issue the decision straight away if it was granted. But if there's any delay, we would still be writing to the inspector to say that there's a positive resolution from committee. So we'll get that, and we'll do that in a matter of probably tomorrow, if members are reminded to do that, to make sure that it's flagged up before any decision's made.
Thank you. Any further questions before we? No, thank you very much. Then thank you for speaking, and we do like to return to your seats. Thank you. And I'll Councillor Crump, if you'd like to address this committee, thank you, in a minute, when everybody's sat down, thank you. Councillor Crump.
Thank you, Chair. Well, first of all, I'd like to apologise for the site gate not being open again for the site visit this morning. Not quite sure what happened there. As you've heard from the planning officer, parish council and local residents, there are several concerns with the position of this site. Something that several of these things we have talked about, but it's stated there will be 4 lorry deliveries per month and no other mention of any other transport. The company rents out the machinery to the recycling industry. At the end of the period of the rental, it will be returned to this site for storage, we assume. So will this not increase the level of traffic to the site, as it doesn't include those compactors and balers that will be repaired each month? I assume that the 4 lorries per month are for that. In addition, there would be there are to be assumably 8 employees on the site, all who will not be able to arrive by public transport, as there are none. Depending on how local they are, because we've been told that they will be local employees, they could arrive via bicycle, not that I'd probably recommend it on that road, motorbikes or cars. Walking on this road isn't recommended, as it's only 4.5 metres wide, not the 6 metres wide that is being said about, something that the parish councillor was trying to get in just on the end of his report there. The former cattle shed will be used to store the weather-sensitive compactors. Where are the rest of them going to be stored? Will it be by the side? I think that's where we were looking at today, which is the area where the roly-poly cars were going backwards and forwards. So those wouldn't be going backwards and forwards from that point. So that's something to be aware of. Also, there will be, on that hard standing will be where lorries will need to turn and 8 potential employee vehicles parked. So it's being aware this is a storage facility site as well as a repair site. The washdown area will require a 4-metre acoustic barrier to reduce the noise levels, but it's come to light about the water pressure. I won't go on about that anymore. We're all aware of that being said earlier. Will the noise within the building and from the pressure washers be continual throughout the day? Is it acceptable noise for the location? Has the agent in our questions today satisfied this concern with her answer? Please take note of the enforcement on the previous site and the fact that the company has already moved some of the equipment to this site in anticipation of approval, changing the application in the past few days to a retrospective yet again. Also, please take note of the many conditions recommended by the planning officer for this site prior to occupation. How will this be possible if the equipment and things are already on site, and how will that be managed? I'm not opposed to the reuse of a site, but is this really the correct place for a regional depot of a large independent waste equipment supplier? And it's just putting all of that into perspective, and is this the right place for this type of thing? Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Councillor Crump. I'll open it for debate for the rest of the committee. I'd say we've covered quite a lot of ground there. Have any comments at all? Remarkably quiet. Councillor Dawkes.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very uncomfortable with the area next door, but it would seem that we're going to have to be pragmatic about that. I feel that the agent has addressed with this EG3 use, which seems very onerous on them to keep the noise down. The fact that they're only repairing 2 vehicles a month stands with the fact that they're only going to have 4 HGVs, because that's 2 vehicles in and 2 vehicles out, so that all seems to make sense. It's a good reuse of buildings. provided we can get the necessary letters out to the inspector, I'd recommend approval in line with the officer's recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Dawes. Are there any further comments? Councillor Gooch, followed by Councillor Tourier.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I entirely agree with Councillor Dawes. I think the proposed change of use on this site alone is a suitable reuse of no longer functional agricultural buildings. It supports our rural economy. It's a sensible reuse of the buildings and land. My only concern is the adjacent site, but given that we have no real control over that, I think we do have to trust that our officers will fully convey that matter to the planning inspector, and we can hope for the best that the planning inspector takes a sensible view of that. So I'm happy to second the recommendation for approval.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Tourier.
Thank you. Yes, I agree it's a good use of site. What I'm concerned about is that the applicant, when it was refused last time, immediately just carried on and did what he wanted to do and had an enforcement order against him. So I think we're putting all our eggs in one basket, that the appeal judge will conform with what we would like. I just don't have much confidence in the applicant. However, I think there's nothing wrong with the use of the site. I'm just concerned about how it works.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Is there any more comments? I agree with your comments that we should have to rely, I'm afraid, on the officers to, if we approve this application, to go back to the inspectorate, because I think none of us actually want two sites approved here. But I'm in favour of this actually application based on that. Anybody else got any comments on this? Therefore, I have a proposal from Councillor Dawes, seconded by Councillor Gooch. Over to you, Heather. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So just for the avoidance of doubt, if members would just bear with me, I'm going to read out the motion as I consider that where we're at the moment. So I've got to delegate authority to the Director of Planning and Infrastructure to grant planning permission subject to the conditions listed below, allowing for any subsequent amendments to those planning conditions as required by the Director of Planning and Infrastructure, and also for officers to make representations to the inspector who has conduct of the appeal referenced in the report that planning permission has been granted in respect of this application and that is a material consideration. Is we happy with that, members? If that's okay with everyone, I propose we move then. Sorry.
Councillor Adams, sorry, you want to say something?
Clarification, because I jumped the gun and proposed it earlier.
You did.
Am I still all right to vote now?
You certainly are all right to vote. We've had a proposal and saying, do you mind?
Yes, I know, but I want to clear my own pack. If somebody come to say, as I made my predetermined earlier on in the debate.
I think you proposed before your time, which is really good.
Yes,
so
Mr. Chairman, I don't want this turn to be facetious over it, but I hadn't heard the local members' comments at that time. Therefore, that's why I asked the question.
I think that's the legal point. Is that all right with you?
I think in the fact that you're broadly in line with what everybody's actually said, so I don't see that it would be a major problem, Councillor Adams, in this instance. If it was that you had, said something very clearly different, then I think that I might be actually saying otherwise. So if everyone's, if the proposer and seconder are happy with my wording, we can move to the vote then, please. So
happy, Councillor Dawson Gooch?
Oh. Yes, I'm happy.
Yeah. So those in favour, please raise your voting cards. That's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much. And now it's 27 minutes past 3. I'm going to have a quick break for 8 minutes. That's before we do the next one. So you've got 8 minutes. Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Thank you for returning. Item 9. Application 22/01597, land at Wire Road, Pershaw, which we saw this morning, development of 94 dwellings for William Davis Limited. We have 3 speakers. Councillor Pennycar, again, thank you very much. If you'd like to come forward. In the parish council seat this time, I think. Mr. John Nixon and Ms. Kirsty Clifton, if you'd like to come forward, thank you. Mr. Right, have we got somebody else? Yeah, Mr. John Nixon, if you'd like to sit there, thank you. Okay, in the middle there, if you want. I was going to say a thorn between 2 roses, but I better not, because that's being sexist. I've got it round the other way, you've probably noticed. But welcome, thank you for coming. Planning officer for this item is Gemma Smith again. So, Gemma, could you please outline the application? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the application in front is the development of 94 dwellings, including 40% affordable homes, associated access, drainage and green infrastructure. The location plan. So the application is forwarded to be determined by members of the Planning Committee today because of a ward member referral. The application site here on this location plan comprises of approximately 8.8 hectares of largely agricultural grassland adjacent to Wire Road to the north, and it's to the north of Pershaw. The site is bound to the north by the Wire Road here at the north and beyond the employment uses at Keytuck. The site is bordered further to the south by Piddle Brook here and also by wider agricultural land. To the west, you've got Travis Perkins and the Wychavon Garage and also the Hurst Meadows Taylor Wimpey scheme just here. The site comprises of 3 main fields, one of which is dominated by the dense scrub, which is around here, and characterised by hedgerows. A proportion of the site is identified to fall within flood zones 2 and 3, which is to the south of the site. The application site forms part of an application which was previously refused in 2015 and a different development plan. So the aerial photography, showing the key areas here. This shows the dense scrub area in the fields with the application site and the areas around. This slide shows the application site in context with the current adopted plan, so notably outside of the significant gap. To the north, the brown denotes residential development which has now been built out. So this is Hurst Meadows. Slide 5 is the merging plan. So this slide shows the application site again in context. We've got the application here on the right in context with the development plan review. The brown area here denotes the residential allocation for the site. The built development of the site is within this site allocation the site allocation in the emerging plan is 4 hectares. Some of the areas of the site allocation are not being developed because of flood constraints, and the proposed site allocation is earmarked for 72 dwellings. And we return to the site plan. The scheme was originally proposed for 111 dwellings, which extended into an eastern field here. The reasons for the reduction and of this revised scheme are set out clearly within the report. The scheme proposes for a development of 94 dwellings, including 40% affordable homes, which is 38, comprising of 26 social rent units, 12 affordable ownership, which include shared and first homes. The scheme has a net developable area of 2.59 hectares, together with associated green infrastructure of circa 6.17, which is 70% of the total area, so it exceeds the 40% of green infrastructure. These areas include the ecological areas and sustainable drainage features. The revised scheme proposes built development to be contained within the western field, only within the limits of the emerging site allocation. A drainage feature is featured in the eastern field here, and the remainder of the eastern field and southern fields provide additional GI and ecological and biodiversity enhancement. The access is proposed via a new access here, and there's further details which are given in this presentation. In terms of the housing mix, the proposal seeks for 94, 56 are open market with 38 affordable. The mix is set out within the officer's report in further detail. There's a wide variety of mix of housing types for the open market homes. Some of the main housing types are seen on these slides. There's a bungalow in the top left, a Rowan type, and there's 3, 4 and 5 bedroom properties proposed. There's also a smaller variety and mix of house types for the affordable housing, which feature 1 bedroom flats, which are designed in the street seen as traditional housing forms, and 2 and 3 bedroom properties. So turning to the access again, to serve the development, a new access has been proposed, as you can clearly see on this site plan. So sorry, this shouldn't say indicative site plan on the presentation, that's an error. So, this plan shows the swept path analysis for the new access. So what's proposed is a 5.5 wide carriageway with a 2 metre footway along the western side. The junction visibility displays here are 120 metres to the east and 118 to the west, and the Highway Authority have no objection to this final access layout. Comments have been received regarding extending the footway provision along Wyre Road and beyond the Ketek Island. The agent has provided a full response within revisions received by the Council on the 6th of May. This plan shows the general arrangement of access arrangements. So a footway will extend on the southern side of Wyre Road to the west, which will join into the existing footpath. There's also a new cycleway and footway which will extend to the east along the southern side, and a new toucan crossing will be installed to the east of the site access. Off-site works will be secured through a Section 278 agreement. Turning to the detailed landscape scheme, this plan shows an overview of the proposed landscaping schemes, and these are in more further detail within pages 182 to 185 of the officer's report, and it also summarises the LVIA and the landscape strategies that are proposed. There are no landscape objections to this final iteration of the scheme. This is a detail in further detail. So this is a plan, zoomed in, to show the planting which is incorporated across the site. Most of these are outside of private ownership. So in terms of informing that final landscape scheme, we turn to the LVIA and the viewpoints. And there's some slides here which show out the viewpoints. So this one is looking west from the Worcester Road and across the site with the dashed line at the top. And again, looking from Avon Meadows, from Mill Lane, this is the site from the Ketek Island, or as I call it, Pershore Trading Estate. So you've got the site on the side, and this is also from Breeden Hill. So an overview of the site in context of things like the significant gap, which is obviously being removed in the emerging plan. Turning to drainage, this is a preliminary drainage scheme. We have no objection from the lead local flood authority. As I've stated before and highlighted in the report, a proportion of the site falls within flood zones 2 and 3, which are attributed to the Piddle Brook to the south of the site. However, I've misclarified that there is no built form planned within those areas. All built form associated with the proposed development is located above the EA, and that's hydraulic modelling max flood level. In brief, as detailed within the key supporting technical documents, there are 3 main catchments, and there are no technical objections, as we stated. In terms of the proposed habitat plan, to note, the original application was received prior to the 12th of February 2024, so the trigger for major applications for BNG delivery. However, we are still delivering over the 10% of biodiversity net gain on the site. So Piddle Brook to the south is a designated local wildlife site situated along the southern boundary, And also we've got the River Avon Local Wildlife Site, which is a designated non-statutory site, which is also in close proximity. The baseline habitat here, so these are the areas that have been mapped, and they're largely comprising, as you can see, of other neutral grassland with dense scrub and also some areas of wet grassland. And here's the proposed habitat plan, so the areas which are included within the metric. So the site currently supports areas of habitat units, hedgerow units and river units, and to be lost is 37.58 habitat units are shown to be lost. And these are comprising predominantly of neutral grassland and scrub, as we've stated, and of low distinctive habitat. The proposed development scheme would comprise of 69.53 habitat units, 9.86 hedgerow units and 8.3 river units. So that would result in a moderate gain in river units and also a small net gain in habitat units and a significant gain for hedgerows. Again, we turned back to the site plan. In conclusion, whilst there are some deficiencies in the design that have been noted by the latest update of the Urban Design Officer comments that have also been incorporated within the officer's update of yesterday, there are no technical objections to this proposal. The site is identified for residential development in the emerging review, and it's located on the edge of a town with good accessibility options for a range of local services and employment opportunities. In the tilted balance, the proposal would provide for much needed housing and obviously within an emerging site allocation and for affordable housing. Contributions are sought for transport, formal sports, leisure, healthcare and active travel. There are no harms identified to demonstrably outweigh the identified benefits here. So as such, the officer's recommendation is one of approval, subject to a Section 106 to secure those contributions and the appropriately worded conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Councillor Carr, I think you're acting for Wychavon Parish Council, so you have 3 minutes, thank you.
We would much prefer that this development does not proceed, and we have many valid reasons for our objections. But I've only got 3 minutes, so I'm not going to reiterate them. We fully understand that because South Worcestershire has no valid development plan and an insufficient housing supply, Wychavon is effectively providing an all-you-can-eat buffet for developers. So we need to look at this development and to ensure that if you approve the application, no opportunities to improve our neighbourhood are missed. Our parish council has therefore asked that the footway cycleway, which included in the development, should be extended along the entire northern boundary of the site. At present, the eastern part of Wyre Road is well used by pedestrians and cyclists and is dangerous. The road is surprisingly busy, curves so that visibility is not good, has a national speed limit, no lighting, no footpath and narrow verges. The most dangerous part is navigating the roundabout. If the footway cycleway we have suggested was incorporated into the plans, pedestrians and cyclists could connect to the active travel route into Pershore and wouldn't need to cross the roundabout. Half of the proposed footway cycleway and a toucan crossing are already included in the plan, and all we are asking is that this should be extended across the eastern field to Wyre Road. At present, the road is used by cyclists and pedestrians as it's the only way to the nearest supermarket, station, high school and Pershore town centre. High school children returning late from school also walk home down the road, in winter doing so after dark. But this proposed footway and cycleway would not just benefit the existing residents. Wychavon has the nearest pub for residents of this proposed estate, the nearest community hall, the nearest access to the River Avon, and this route would keep them safer. The developers have elected not to include this footway cycleway because it would, 1, require amendment of the BNG arrangements, and 2, because they don't think that the road is safe to connect to. This has not been discussed with Highways or the Environmental Officer as far as I'm aware, so please defer a decision until it has been. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Mr. John Nixon, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
I speak with a vested interest from Wychavon. I've lived in Wychavon 53 years, although I've actually worked around the world in China, America and Scandinavia, as well as in the home country here. My background is I'm an economist and social planner, which is like having the black spot from Treasure Island at the moment. I'm going to raise a couple of points for consideration by members. Firstly, the strain on local services by such a development. 94 houses will have additional strain on local doctors, which are severely under pressure at the moment, pharmacists, dentists, and emergency services. Opticians seem to be well catered for in Pershore. There's no robust plan, as far as I can see, in any planning given, which demonstrates these services will be improved or expanded. My figure from a redoubtable source suggests that £100,000 contribution to the NHS would not go amiss to ratify some of the problems. In a odd way, the figures given in the paperwork from the local authority suggest a total popular increase of about 280, I think, 200, thereabouts, maybe less. I think from my research that well over 325 people will be occupying the houses there. And if we take the decision to allow 34 houses down the road, then they will go up. The numbers will increase as well. Secondly, a point I would make, the environmental impact, I think, will be enormous. The loss of green space, the potential disruption for wildlife, and the risk of exacerbating flooding issues in the area, much as we've been reassured that they will not take place. The fourth point I would raise is a very simple one for our country as a whole, is the loss of a rural character. The scale of development is at odds in relation to the size and nature of Pershore. It effectively amounts to urban sprawl, and I assure you, coming from the West Riding, I do know what urban sprawl is. The gap between Pershore and Wyre has effectively gone. Wyre-Piddle will be an entity which has disappeared. Now, the housing plans and numbers, the fifth point I would make very quickly. I can't make it.
Sorry, you'd be very good. Thank you for all those comments.
Not at all. It's my fault for going on.
You just have to speak quicker in this committee, that's the only problem. But thank you for your contribution, Mr. Nixon. Ms. Kirsty Clifton, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of the application. The application was submitted with the intention of supporting your emerging local plan, demonstrating the site's suitability as a proposed allocation for much needed housing in the district. That could not be more pertinent now, given the scale of the national housing crisis. It also underpins the Council's commitment to deliver housing and address the current significant undersupply of housing land and mitigate the acute lack of affordability within the district. That can be addressed by securing planning permissions such as this that underpin the spatial strategy of a well-progressed local plan review. The scheme delivers 38 affordable homes of a mix that will meet local needs and is supported by officers. It includes bungalows and other accessible homes for older or less mobile residents, along with a broad mix of homes that will offer variety to existing and new residents to the area. Since submission, we've engaged with officers and worked hard to address the specific matters raised in feedback. Most notably, we've contained all housing development to the western field within the area of allocated land in response to officers' views on visual impact, while still maintaining a third of that for public open space. In turn, we've created an ecological enclave within the eastern field that prevents public access to protect the veteran tree and secure long-term biodiversity enhancements as requested. These positive measures also sterilise this land from future development. The scheme will deliver high-quality homes that are sympathetic to their surroundings, benefiting from a landscaped outlook that will subtly filter views of development over the longer term, as agreed by your landscape officer. We also concur with the Urban Design Officer's suggestion that the play area can be located within the south of the site and have proposed a mown route through the open space as recommended. The proposals are fully supported by the Flood Authority, Drainage Team, Highway Authority, Heritage and Arboricultural officers, with SUDS features that protect adjacent trees and minimise loss of ridge and furrow, and the improved pedestrian and cycle access along Wire Road. This scheme also goes well beyond energy standards, reducing CO2 by over 24% through the provision of solar energy. William Davis builds high-quality homes across the Midlands, and as a family-owned business has a long-held reputation that is acknowledged, the company recently receiving its 10th successive 5-star Builder Award. They're committed to delivering a cohesive new community for Pershore and new homes that will bring significant economic benefits in job creation and revenue to the local economy. This application helps to deliver homes that are vitally needed and will fully meet its obligations for infrastructure in accordance with CIL and policy standards. We hope that you'll recognise its important role in supporting housing delivery and support your officer's carefully considered recommendation for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The ward members again are, but this is a split ward actually, so we're very pleased to welcome Councillor Liz Tucker, and we have Councillor Charles Tucker, who are related, if you didn't already gather that. As I said earlier, Councillor Boatwright Green is tied up on county activities. He's a ward member, so is Councillor Jodie Arnold. Shall I come to ladies first? Councillor Liz Tucker, have you any questions or to clarify for the speakers?
Something that I would like clarified is whether or not we do have clear statement that the green area is open public space or not. I'm not clear how that works.
The area for development in terms of the housing development in the allocated land is open space. So all of the space within that area is for public access. The area to the east is not for public access. That's for retained biodiversity and ecological enhancement, and that was through the discussions with the officers from a landscape and ecology perspective.
So just so I understand, the public are allowed to walk around the streets, but they can't go in the green areas?
They can go within the green areas within the western field.
Right, so they can go back down to the brook?
They can go within, the area down to the brook is protected.
Any further questions? No. Councillor Charles Tucker, have you any questions? No. Thank you. I'll open it to committee. Have you any questions you want clarifying from the speakers? Councillor Ali. So Dyke.
Well, it was more for the flooding. I mean, we heard that it was subject to flooding, and I wondered if there were sufficient measures to prevent further flooding within the site.
Would you like to address that to drainage to Andrew Farr?
Well, yes, that's what I was
Andrew Farr.
hoping we'd have an answer.
Thank you, Chair. Is it possible to put the drainage scheme plan up, the slide that you had? That's the one. So you've got the predominantly pink area, which is the development. To the southwest of that, you've got a green patch, which is another catchment area. So the flood zones 2 and 3 lie just to the southeast of that little green patch. That's the highest level of flooding that's been calculated based on river level information from the EA.
Sorry, where?
So where you've got the predominantly pink area, where you've got that's it. So those lines there are the flood zone areas as calculated from the EA data.
Which is rather close to the housing.
But it's all in flood zone 1.
Right. So the housing will not be affected.
All the development takes place in flood zone 1.
Okay. And there's sufficient plans in place to prevent the flooding getting worse?
I'm not quite sure what you're getting at on that one.
You've got a attenuation.
Oh, sorry, yes. So at the top right-hand side of the screen, the predominant predominantly the development drains to that wetted pond. So there's a pond there which will have a permanently wetted basin for all your aquatic plants and the biodiversity gain, all that sort of stuff. The middle bit has oversized pipes with a restricted discharge going into an ordinary watercourse, and then the bit to the southwest has its own small attenuation pond with a restricted discharge going out to the same watercourse.
Yeah, and that you find that is satisfactory.
Absolutely. So the developer has used data from the EA. There's predicted river levels. The LLFA have been through it, we've been through it, and we're all happy with what's been submitted.
Thank you. Sorry, somebody else wanted to ask a question. Councillor Dyke.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Gemma, this is not a question for you, but I know that you have been requesting bungalows, more bungalows on this development. So the question is to the agent. I'm going to have one last go to see if you would be able to switch one of the properties into an additional bungalow, which will make a total of 4 as opposed to a total of 3. So it's not very much.
As you'll, I'm sure, because the application has been in negotiation with the officer for an awfully long time, there's a really careful balance across, and it takes into account all sorts of factors in terms of topography, in terms of arrangements with other house types and the layout as well. So we ultimately have proposed the 3 bungalows, and I don't propose to make a change to that. However, we do also have another 4 ground floor flats that are accessible as well. So effectively, there's 7 units.
Thank you. Are there any more? Councillor Tourier, followed by Councillor Gooch.
Thank you for the agent. Can you show me where, or 2 questions actually, can you show me where the play area is? And also, am I right in thinking, if you're looking at this map, the bright green at the top right-hand corner is enclosed, but the residents will be able to walk in the rest of the green area?
In terms of the play area is shown at the moment at the top of the site, where the star is. There's a condition specifically in relation to that, because the subsequent feedback from the urban design officer has suggested that should prefer if that moved. So that would be incorporated. I think our view, and in terms of her feedback, suggests that in the south of the site, which was a location that had been considered previously, would be a preference. But there is a condition that is proposed by officers that would address that. In relation to the area to the east, the light-coloured area is actually a reptile receptor site, which is part of, because we're building on an area of land where they could effectively cross. What you do is you protect that and you ensure that you've got a place that is actually safe for them. So it is a reptile receptor site. But all of the land to the east and to the south, in terms of, is not accessible to the public on the basis that it's protected for reptiles and for biodiversity and for ecology. We are enhancing it in terms of the planting and so forth within it, but it's protected from public access specifically because there are certain things that can't be achieved in biodiversity terms with public access going to it.
So you're going to fence it off completely?
It will be. It will basically maintain the existing field fence, the boundary.
Okay, thank you. My mind actually expands when I think of reptiles, just to see what reptiles are. Councillor Gooch, followed by Councillor Dawkes, followed by Councillor Morris.
Yeah, I'd like to just follow on from the question of the protection of the natural habitat. Can you give us a bit more detail of the nature of the fencing that will be used, and who will be responsible for maintaining the natural habitat after the development has been built?
The field boundary will be effectively a rural field boundary, as it is. I'm not aware that there are any changes proposed in that regard or a requirement for that. Ultimately, the maintenance of, there's an obligation on the developer to maintain the landscape and to maintain and achieve the biodiversity requirement, there will be a management company that deals with that, but that will be secured through the Section 106.
Just come back. So it's just going to be a standard kind of farm-style low-level fence, which
We've
is...
not had a discussion specifically in relation to that. I have to say it's not a specific detail that's been requested by any officers.
Okay, because I would point out that obviously a fence like that really is only protecting access by people who are not able-bodied. You'll get every teenager in the estate jumping the fence, I'm sure of that. And so you are going to have making holes in the fence when they can. So you are going to have a significant burden of maintaining what they damage. And I just want to be sure that you're fully aware of that and fully committed to that.
There is an obligation on the developer to maintain landscape and biodiversity.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Dawkes, followed by Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure who this is for. It's on the supplemental changes to conditions. Condition 6. The new proposal says, and a development shall not be completed otherwise than in accordance with the details so approved and shall be so maintained. Who's maintaining it and how and what? That's a rather glib statement.
Thank you. That's a question for me. So it would be maintained again, so they were talking about the public open space again and also the play provision. So that would be maintained as part of the obligation for public open space. So that would be discussed as part of a Section 106 agreement and a management company and the clauses within that document.
Thank you. And subsequent to that, a change to condition 11, where you're reducing the maintenance period from 30 years to 5. That seems rather a drastic change.
It's the request from the applicant. On most schemes, the LEMP, that we commonly call it, is 30 years. So it's 30 years maintenance of the site. So that's to do with all the landscaping, planting, etc. But again, that's a discussion, isn't it, for after our standard condition is 30 years. That's what's proposed today within our proposal, our recommendation.
Sorry, so today we're looking at 30 years and they're trying to change it.
That's correct. In their comments, they wanted 5. I mean, I don't know whether that's a question for the agent, for the developer today.
Well, what I want to understand is what am I approving or not approving? Am I approving 30 years or 5 years? I'm not sure.
30 years remains, so it's still within the pack.
Okay, thank you.
Today, the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Morris, followed by Councillor Turrier.
Thank you. I'd like to pick up on the cycleway. I don't feel I quite understand what is proposed. From the parish council, it suggests there isn't going to be a cycleway. So have we got a map that can show us? And kind of allied to that will be, why can't we put that on as a condition? That's what I'm heading for.
I think that's a query for the agent to clarify. Just hold on.
I suppose what I can confirm is, as was set out by the officers, in terms of the access arrangements, we have the new entrance, we have the Toucan crossing, and we have footways either side of that connect. But we also have a pedestrian cycleway from the Toucan crossing that takes you to the eastern edge of our site, which was shown, I think, on the diagram. So that takes us to the eastern edge of the developed area of the site, I should add. Okay, that is a safe and secure, and that is something that has been signed off by the Highway Authority. The discussion the proposal put forward by the parish council was to actually have a further pedestrian and cycle route that ran through the northern edge of the eastern field and then joined the wire road at the northeastern corner of the eastern field. Now, in our consideration of that, ultimately we have obviously explained here that we have no public access in that eastern field. And actually that would result in development of the eastern field as well, which has a further impact from an ecology perspective, from a biodiversity perspective, because you also have to then take away certain field boundaries, which are actually quite substantial in that regard. Where that would exit the eastern field would also be on a blind spot on the Wire Road. Ultimately, if you were going eastwards, you wouldn't be able to necessarily see the traffic coming towards you. But ultimately, we're saying, on the discussions with the ecologist and the landscape officer, we agreed that we would remove development from the eastern field and we would secure that for biodiversity and ecology enhancement and maintain it as that without public access. And therefore, there isn't an ability to create an extension of the pedestrian cycleway, and in our view I don't think it would be a safe option because it's not connecting then into anything, which would be the feedback that we would expect to have.
Councillor Thurier.
Thank you. I'm talking about the play area. It looks fairly small, and I wondered if it was a specific amount that you have to have per number of houses, because, so this is really for Gemma, I think, or the agent, I'm not sure.
We don't have a specific SPD or county level, so obviously there's a condition there for adequate equipment, but it's a local. It's a local area of play, so it's distinguished between a leap or a neep, isn't it? So there are certain levels of equipment that would be required. I know that doesn't really answer your query, but there is a condition to obviously require that, and it's specifically as a lap, not the other elements of play provision.
Because it's a lot of houses, a lot of kids.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Clatworthy, followed by, I think, Councillor Morris. Councillor Clatworthy.
Question for the agent, please. I'll call it the top right-hand corner. Am I right in saying you said it's going to be a reptile area? First question is, what reptiles? And two, if it's a fenced-off area, we heard the question earlier about the height of the fencing. What about the depth of the fencing?
The receptor site is for reptiles. It doesn't include great-crested newts, but it's other reptiles within that relate to the watercourse. That area is not going to be essentially fenced off per se. That field boundary will remain, but that area will be allocated at the start of construction. It's not a permanent feature. It's an area because, from ecology perspective, we are required to allow for that to move any reptiles that are found that cross a particular area away from the construction.
Councillor Morris.
Question for Councillor Carr. I'm still confused on the cycleway, and I don't understand the conflict. Could you please explain what the conflict is, why you disagree with what the developer is saying?
Thank you. So if you look at the indicative site plan, which is showing at the moment, the current plan includes, so you can see the roundabout at the top, and Wire Road towards Wire Piddle is the road that comes down on the right-hand side with that curvy bend at the top.
Yep.
The current proposal does not include any protection for the cyclists and pedestrians there. You can see on the left-hand top quarter there is a dotted yellow line which shows a cycleway coming out of the proposed estate, and there is also a toucan crossing which goes across that part of Wire Road onto a very good new active travel pathway which takes people into Pershore safely. Our issue is that if you come up Wire Road from Wire Piddle on the right along the top of the right-hand side bit, that roundabout is dangerous. The whole road's dangerous. But what we've asked is that at the top right-hand corner of the site, you should put a cycle path into the eastern field and run it along the inside of the hedge boundary. So you would lose, whatever it is, 8 foot of that non-public space, and run it all the way along to join up with the cycleway that's already proposed. And that would mean that people coming up and down Wyre Road already, and people living on the estate who will go into Wyre because it's got the nearest facilities, would be able to do so without having to walk or cycle around that roundabout, which is dangerous. It would also give the opportunity in the future to connect further down, but that's, you know, not today's issue.
Is there any reason why we can't condition that as described, please?
Okay, well, I'll just ask Kieran to sum up on one or two things. Kieran?
Thank you, Chair. So in terms of connectivity, that is obviously a consideration for members, and ensuring that the right connectivity is there. What we need to be mindful of is that if any proposals are to mitigate the impact of the development and ensure that that's safe and there's safe connectivity. In this case, the main sort of transport routes are into Pershore, and that's been identified and supported in by the County Council as Highway Authority, who deem it to be a safe and appropriate, providing that this mitigation in terms of cycle provision is provided. So if we're to try and extend that to a further perspective, then it has to be justified, and we haven't got that technical reasoning as it stands. The other impact is it does have knock-on effects, as we've spoken about, and that would be a matter of balance. But I think, as it stands, we don't. I think officers would say it's probably not something that we could justify in a technical perspective, because the Highway Authority have accepted that this is an acceptable and sustainable location. It connects up to existing infrastructure to serve this development. It doesn't impact, or it doesn't need to mitigate existing impacts or necessity. So it's that balance, but ultimately that's the advice we've got from County Highways as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Dawes?
Chair. I think this one's for Officer, please. This developer's got a history on some previous sites, notably Fernal Heath and one or two others, of not finishing. And not finishing things like footpaths and landscaping, or not going back and repairing it. And I wonder if we can't condition some of those into here so that they're done prior to occupation or prior to sale, or some sort of thing to... There's some ongoing problems, and I think we should be aware of those and condition them through.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, it is a difficult situation when that happens. In terms of planning permissions, they go with the land, and it's not sort of part of the judgment of that isn't on sort of how developers may or may not act. So we can only really impose stricter conditions based if they're necessary in planning terms, rather than what we may or may not happen. Ultimately, there is enforcement powers to deal with breaches of conditions, etc. And I appreciate that's another matter in itself, but ultimately it's very difficult for us to control that unless there's good planning grounds, and unfortunately that's not a material planning consideration about what they may or may not do and whether they actually comply with conditions or not going forward.
If it helps just to add, because Kieran may not be aware of some other context, that matter is with the Director of Planning and with the enforcement team in terms of some other sites. So the powers that we have that Kieran's referred to, we will use where appropriate, and say in regards to some other circumstances that we are going through that process.
Thank you very much. Are there any more relevant questions at all? Is this connected? Councillor Turu?
Just wanted to ask about the eco-friendly houses, if it was going to apply to all the houses or just some of them.
In terms of the energy assessment, I mean, basically there is a fabric first approach, and in terms of the construction of the houses, there is a list of sort of features that I can give you. But ultimately, we undertook an energy assessment, and through the provision of photovoltaics, and there will be a balance across the site. It won't be each and every single house that will have photovoltaics, but it will be in terms of the construction and the measures that go with it, in terms of the efficient use of materials, in terms of the effective boilers, water management and so forth of every property.
Would you differentiate between social housing and open plan housing?
in terms of social and market housing, there will be a proportion across the site. The assessment will take into account that, and we will have to deliver on that in terms of the units. I can have a quick look in terms of whether I've got an actual notice to the quantum. I mean, ultimately, I don't have reference to say that each and every single house will have solar panels, but ultimately we're required to provide at least a 10% reduction on CO2, and with all of the measures that we've got 24%. We have also efficient lighting. We have A and A star rated goods, smart meters, air tightness, and so forth.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think with no more questions, thank you. I'd like to see it. Thank you very much. Could you like to return to your seats? Thank you. So we have two ward members, split ward. Who would like to say something first of all? Councillor Charles Tucker.
Thank you. First of all, I'd just like to make a comment about the fact that we haven't got a Pershore Town Council representative here. As the chairman of the Parish Council Planning Committee, Town Council Planning Committee, I did suggest that they might like to attend, but they said, well, you can do it for us. So whether that's a comment on my competence, on their laziness, I'll leave you to remark. Anyway, I do speak for this as a Pershore representative. And I think it is a wholly unimaginative development. I think it doesn't do justice to an important site environmentally or socially. I think it's on the edge of the Pershore, and it'll be a site that people see as they come into the town, and I really don't feel that it is what Pershore deserves, or indeed what Wychavon deserves either, but I'm speaking for Pershore here. It is actually quite isolated from the town, and I don't think that that is a recipe for a good social mix of development or a development which will integrate well with the town. I'm glad we've got the indicative site plan up there, because it really does illustrate how unimaginative this design is. Houses are just jammed in there on a very basic street layout. I think that a developer should be castigated for not doing an awful lot better than this. And I do hope that we will not approve this today, but send it back for the developer to come up to a much better solution, which is more imaginative and more in keeping with the needs of the area. I think that probably part of the problem is that they're trying to cram in too many houses in that site. 94 houses in comparison to the SWDP allocation of 72. I think the 72 would be okay and would allow for a much better layout and a much better environment generally for the residents of that new housing estate. So that's my comment on the actual development. Having been on the site visit this morning and standing at where the access is going to be, it came home to me very strongly that the traffic on that road is extremely noisy and will have a very detrimental effect on the residents of that housing development if it is approved. And if I would very much like to see a condition put on, if the development is approved, to protect the entire of the roadside hedge that runs along the front of the hedge. And I don't mean keeping a hedge there. I don't mean seeing the hedge cut down to 6 feet. I mean protecting the hedge as it is. It's tree lined. It's a very good acoustic screen. It's very important for the visual impact of that site. And to be honest, if it's developed like that, I'd like it to see it hidden away anyway. Could I now go to the drainage design. That's the one, yes. I recall from our discussions about the design, our design manual or our design brief that we produced some time back, that we were against the idea of bomb crater flood defense mechanisms or surface water treatment systems. And these are bomb craters again. I know that the one on the right-hand side, the top right-hand corner, has got water in it, but it is still a bomb crater with gradients of 1 in 3 on either side, all the way around. And that really does not create an attractive or indeed a good environment for wildlife habitat to develop. So I think if we do give permission, I would like to see the design of that and also the design of the one on the bottom left-hand corner amended so that the gradients leading into the wet area at the bottom are substantially reduced in order to improve the biodiversity of those wetlands. The one on the left, I'm not even sure that there is water intended to be in that normally, and I think if we're going to get a substantial benefit in terms of sustainable drainage, there should be, that one should be clearly designed, the bottom left-hand corner, should be clearly designed to include water all the time. Finally, the one in the middle, the green area, I think is unacceptable as it stands because the proposal is merely to attenuate the flow volume through the use of enlarged pipes. No treatment, no biological enhancement, not a sustainable drainage solution. It's not good enough. There is plenty of scope along there, though, to make the drainage run which runs along the edge of the development, make that into a swale, an open ditch designed to hold and attract wildlife in it, and before it is discharged. Otherwise, I'm afraid that green area really should not. It's not a sufficient sustainable drainage solution, and it must be modified. Finally, the Town Council has certainly agreed and supports the proposal from Wychavon Parish Council to have a cycleway linking back as far as possible towards Wychavon. I think this is only right and proper when we're considering considering active travel, and that is very much something that the Town Council supports as well as the Parish Council. So, Chairman, I feel that this is not good enough, this development, this proposal as it stands is not good enough, and I do hope that the committee will at least defer it in order that a better design comes forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tucker. Councillor Liz Tucker. Thank you.
Thank you. I've been worried for a long time about the danger of urban sprawl, particularly in the context, obviously, of Throckmorton Newtown. But you can see how development is coming up Wire Road. It's virtually at Wychavon. It's certainly at Pinvin. Once you get the development along the Wychavon bypass, it's going to go up there. We're going to end up with suburban sprawl up to Bishampton if we're not careful as a council. And this goes back, I suppose, to the lack of our planning policy in relation to strategic gaps. Now, obviously, that's a separate subject, except that Wychavon Village is a specific example of how this is happening. I don't think people realise how close the village actually is to the site, because although it's only half a mile to get up and round and into the centre of the village, if you came across the land, it would be very much quicker. And if you were having your site visit when the leaves were off the trees in the winter, you would see something very different to what you see now today. But the point I'm making is that this is a prominent site. It is has high visual impact, and that has been referred to by planners as well as by locals. And we're all going to know all about it, and it's just going to look about a continuation as it is. The point I really want to go into is sustainability. Now, we've been assured that this site is considered sustainable, and you've got the distances written down in your report. And one of the examples of that is that it is 1.9 kilometres to get to Asda in Pershore and the Tesco Express. Now, it's only half a mile to get to Asda at the Euro Garage on Abbeyview Road, and it's about the same distance, if not slightly less, to get to the village hall in Wypiddle, which is one fairly lively hall, and to the pub in the village. I cannot understand why the sustainability of going long distances into Pershore Centre is considered to be more important than supporting the sustainability of going to Wypiddle, to the closer facilities. I do not believe that these people are going to go trogging all the way down. I think that they are very likely to get their social life much closer to Wypiddle issues than they are to the town issues. And that is why I do believe that there is a case, if we're only going to provide active travel supporting towards Pershore, £28,000, I'd rather you spent that £28,000 doing some work on getting footway or the start of cycleway in the Wypiddle direction, because that is where the residents, in my opinion, are likely to be going. And I'm glad we got the tiny bit of the cycleway to go to the Toucan crossing, but I really don't think that that's enough. And if we're talking about sustainability and encouraging people not to have to make unnecessary travel and that sort of stuff, for goodness sake, surely it's more important to go to the close facilities rather than the long-distance facilities of the parish in which it falls. Drainage and flooding is always a worry. The Wypiddle Brook, the Piddle Brook, not the Wypiddle Brook, the Piddle Brook rises very, very fast, and we've got some extraordinary photographs of the Piddle Brook in full flood. It'll be down probably in a day, but when it's up, it's really dangerously up. And another 92 houses are going to presumably increase the speed of the flow of water that goes into that. I know you've got drainage swales or bomb holes, but it is our experience already with the development that's gone on as to the speed of water getting into Mill Lane, and I'm sure that that's going to increase with another 92 houses. The only other point I'd make, I think, is that 70% green infrastructure sounds great, but what we're actually talking about are existing natural green areas being managed to be green areas rather than too many cats and all that sort of stuff. So I'm not happy with the application, you may have gathered, but my key point is the lack of access, safe access to travel up to Wypiddle, and I do believe that there's a serious need for both a path and for a cycleway.
Thank you very much, Councillor Tucker, and the other Councillor Tucker, for your comments. I'll open it for debate for the Councillor Rowley.
Well, I think we've heard some serious issues raised from the local members, and I'd like to propose deferral for further consideration of those issues. I mean, looking at the plan again, I mean, it does seem to be more of a layout and a housing mix for more of a centre town development rather than one on the edge of the town. And I am a little concerned about the additional points that have been raised about the land drainage. And also it would be very beneficial if the residents of this site could get into Wypiddle more easily. So I would urge that we defer the application for consideration of these matters in particular.
Thank you, Councillor Rowley. Councillor Dawes.
Thank you, Chair. I've got to say I think this is a very poor application. I think the housing mix is bad. I think the play area is just an unwanted add-on, seems, from the developer. But nevertheless, Gemma has worked very hard over the last 3 years trying to improve this design. We, as councillors, have had 3 years to get involved in the design. I think it's too late now to be requesting changes. I think they've got a significant financial contribution. There's 62k to the health. The place is part of our emerging plan. The red line is going to preserve a significant amount of green space between Pershore and Wychavon. I think if we could add a condition to preserve the hedge as per Councillor Tucker's requirement, I'd move that we approve this in line with the officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Dawes. Councillor Middlebury.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, I hear what Councillor Dawkes says, and whilst I might not agree entirely with him, I agree with the spirit of it. I also agree with the spirit of, actually, this is an application for Pershore. This is not an application for Wychavon that we're talking about. And there is a degree, I think, of selectivity on some of the things we've heard. For instance, there is a supermarket far closer to this site than the supermarkets in Pershore, and it's not the Piddling supermarket up at the new traffic petrol station. It's the Co-op, which is a well-established one through the industrial estate, which is you can walk through, and it's also, in a sense, part of the route to the school. So on that basis, and it's in the SWD part of the site moving forward, there's a lot of protection for the environment and biodiversity, which isn't going to be trampled across, that I would second Councillor Dawkes' proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Middlebury. Councillor Gooch.
Thank you, Chairman. Having heard a lot of what has been said today, I do have to agree with the comments that this is a pretty poor proposal all round. It could have been so much better, but also I do accept that our officers have worked incredibly hard to even get it to a point where it's not completely and utterly awful. So I am not going to vote against approval today. I would just say that I entirely agree with the local members' comments about the lack of active travel into Wychavon from there. Having just looked at it on Google Street View, it's not a road I drive down. That road is awful. It is completely active travel hostile, isn't it? And this is something that, although we are not the highway authority, we really should be doing our best to encourage the highway authority to work on. And if we can do that via our planning decisions and conditions, that would be very good. But I would just encourage the local members to take this up with your local county councillor and make sure that he works hard to get active travel provisions put into place along that stretch of road.
Thank you, Councillor Gooch. Don't see any other hands for anything at the moment. No? I have initially the first one was a proposition for deferral, but I haven't got a seconder for that. Councillor Tourier.
I will second that.
So we have, in order, a proposition for deferral from Councillor Rowley, seconded by Councillor Tourier, to start with. Am I right? Would you like to do that? And then we go to that first one. I'm in the wrong here. Sorry about that. Lack of experience. Since we had a proposal and seconder for acceptance, we take that first because we didn't have a seconder for the first proposal. So we have a proposal for acceptance for Councillor Dorks, seconded by Councillor Middleborough. Would you like Heather to sum up what we are accepting and the conditions? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the motion is for recommendation to delegate authority to the Director of Planning and Infrastructure to grant planning permission subject to the completion of the 106 legal agreement to secure the obligations as set out in the report and the planning conditions listed in the report and obviously in the updates, allowing for any subsequent amendments to those and with also a condition to protect the hedge. So if everybody's happy with that.
Can I just caveat on that? Just to caveat that slightly, we also need to ensure that we've got visibility displays, etc. So we need a bit of flexibility about actually what that means in practice until we look at it. So I just wanted to mention that point. Sorry.
So with that point of clarification, if we can go to the vote, please. So those in favour, if you could raise your voting cards. Those against? That motion's carried, Chair. That's 10 in favour and 2 against.
Thank you very much to everybody for speaking and for the speakers. Thank you. I think we'll carry on if you're all right. If anybody wants to leave now, please do. Are you all right, committee, to carry on? Yeah. Thank you. This one is moving on to item 10, planning application. Are we all here still? Yes, we are. Yes. 24/02531, land at Evesham Road, Broadway, which is outline application for 17 dwellers, where we had a site visit this morning. We have only one speaker on this, Mr. Robin Goldsmith. Welcome, and would you like to sit in your, thank you, in the centre, I should, because you're important in this one. Thank you. And I think on this one, we're still on Gemma, aren't you? You're having a good day today, Gemma. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So firstly, just to update on an additional update that's been made from the Lead Local Flood Authority, and this is in response to the receipt of an additional information received by the agent. It's a trial hole statement, which is an infiltration test, essentially. So the Lead Local Flood Authority maintains their objection, which is detailed within the officer's report. However, we can discuss this further on today. So the application site, firstly let's talk about what it is. So it's an outline application with all matters reserved, so that's including access, that's also a reserved matters for future consideration for up to 17 dwellings. The site is here and it's off the old Evesham Road. So here is an indicative site plan. So the site consists of a triangular piece of land, those office members that went today. It's got some current contamination issues, perhaps. And it's between the A44, which runs along the eastern side here, and it's off the old Evesham Road, so access will be off the old Evesham Road here. So on the west is a native hedgerow and trees, and on the east and partly off-site a mixed deciduous plantation on top of a raised bank on the A44, so it's sort of the acoustic sounding here along the A44 road. The application's been called in today by members of the, by Councillor Sims for concerns on density, drainage and access issues. The site is located on the north-western edge of Broadway and the small village of Charles Wycombe. The site is 1.5 miles from Broadway High Street, so it's a village centre, and a mile from Charles Wycombe. The Evesham Road Service Road is the only means of vehicular and pedestrian access to the site, and there are, on the indicative plan, 3 accesses proposed, or 2 accesses, but like I say, these are reserved matters for future consideration. The applicant seeks outline permission for up to 17 dwellings, which would comprise 5 open market dwellings, if they were obviously to go forward, 7 affordable units, and 5 self-build custom houses. That's been proposed in the design and access statement. Officers had expressed concerns about the density of the scheme with regards to the lack of incorporation originally of the GI, which is required for 20%, and also the constraints posed by the road noise on future occupants, which would have an impact on amenity, particularly in garden areas. So a noise assessment and this revised plan, which is being considered today, has been received. The total site area, therefore, is 0.8 hectares, and obviously with the dwellings that proposed and now the 20% required for GI, the net developable area is 0.57 hectares, which gives a density for this scheme, if it was up to 17 and proposed at reserved matters, 29. Within the noise acoustic report, there's the noise mitigation assessment. There's a 2.5 tall acoustic screen that's been proposed, but again, this would be subject to obviously reserved matters in the future where the dwellings were sited in this position. So the proposal on the table here is a recommendation of approval. It would contribute to the 5-year housing land supply shortfall. There's no demonstrable adverse impacts at this stage. And when taken as a whole, obviously it's in the planning balance, it's acceptable, subject to those conditions. So one of those conditions obviously is set out for this, the constraints of the sites. There's ecology phase 2 and also the noise to be submitted prior to reserve matters. So those details would need to be discharged in full. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Mr. Robin Goldsmith, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
The Trust objects to this application on 2 principal grounds: unsustainable development and overdevelopment of the proposed location. The recently revised National Planning Policy Framework states in paragraph 83, quote, "To promote sustainable development in rural areas, housing should be located where it will enhance or maintain the vitality of rural communities." The location proposed lies wholly within the parish boundary of Charles Wycombe, a Category 4A village without shop, school or much bus transport. It's separated from the centre of that village by 1,100 metres of farmland. Pennylands Bank is a road that joins that village to the Evesham Road, 400 metres to the southeast of the proposed development. There is no footpath on either side of Pennylands Bank. To get around this obvious failing, the developer suggested it should be considered a satellite of Broadway, some 2,000 metres southeast. It will be clear to all that what is proposed will in no way enhance or maintain the vitality of either village, nor will it enhance or maintain the vitality of the existing community on the other side of the old Evesham Road. It will inevitably be a car-led development, as the nearest shop, school and surgery to support families is in Broadway. The location therefore cannot be considered a sustainable location. MPPF at paragraph 11D2 directs granting permission where no current development plan exists unless adverse effects of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits, having particular regard to key policies for directing development to sustainable locations, making effective use of land, securing well-designed places, and providing affordable homes individually or in combination. The proposed development bears no relation to the existing Evesham Road settlement. The development would clearly be visible from the A44 bypass behind its perimeter fence, and the closeness of the buildings would create an out-of-context, anomalous, urban feel for those approaching Broadway. It's an urban-type development and should not be built in open countryside. We urge the committee to reject the application.
Thank you, Mr. Goldsmith. The two councillors, Councillor Kersey and Councillor Sims, aren't here this afternoon, except I have a statement to read out on behalf of one of them a bit later on. So, ask you, committee, have you any clarification questions to ask either Mr. Goldsmith or anybody else, or the case officer, or Andrew Fell? Councillor Dawes.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one. Mr. Goldsmith, you said you started off your thing with the trust. What do you mean by that? Sorry.
The Broadway Trust is an organisation which was created in 1963 and has spent much of that time trying to ensure that the development of Broadway is sympathetic.
Thank you. Any further questions for anybody? No? Thank you. Then I shall read out this statement from Councillor Emma Sims, who apologises for not being able to attend this meeting. As the committee will have seen from this morning's site visit to the land at Evesham Road, this is a small triangular piece of unused land. I think this is unsuitable land for the density of the housing proposed, 17 dwellings. It's overdevelopment. There are access issues, parking and surface water drainage are all concerns. The comment from the LLFA, and I quote, "There is no evidence to support a credible surface water discharge method from the site, so this will pose a flood risk. Is the land even suitable for soakaways?" Paragraph 83 of the NPPF states, "To promote housing in rural areas where it will enhance or maintain the vitality of rural communities." I contend that this development will do neither. I believe this application is contrary to SWDP 4, SWDP 1, SWDP 21 and SWDP 2 brackets C. I therefore believe this application should be refused. That's from Councillor Emma Sims. So I'll open it to debate from the rest of the committee. Gone rapidly silenced suddenly. Councillor Rowley, thank you.
Well, Charles Wickham's a 4C village, and we don't allow any development. Is that the policy?
We'll clarify that in a minute, actually. Are we? Are we a 4C, but not a 4C village, is it? Clarify that in a minute for you. Councillor Dawes.
Thank you, Chair. Having visited the site this morning, I would say that pretty much anything that was done to that site would be better than what's there now. I'm not sure I like the housing density proposed, but I think, I mean, all we've got at the moment is outline with all matters reserved. We have very little grounds that we can refuse this on. All we could ask for, perhaps, is that all the reserved matters are brought back to us, at which point we can probably reduce the density the drainage issues that could potentially could be there. We could probably use that to reduce the density. But all we've got is an outline with all matters reserved.
Thank you. Councillor Rowley. Councillor Middlebury.
I mean, if it is 4C villages are not.
We'll just come back.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, so I look at the application as it is, and two things strike me. One, it's taken a long time for an application on this site to come forward since the new road was actually built, and I don't quite know why that was. But it strikes me it's more of a PIP application than the application that we have before me. But the application we have is for the reserved outline, so it isn't a PIP. But is there a reason why it's not a PIP?
You got the answer to the first question. Can I put you on the car?
Sure. Sorry. In terms of the village hierarchy, ultimately, this application is presented as a departure from the local plan. So it's effectively, we're saying it's not in compliance with the local plan. We are triggering paragraph 11 of the MPPF, our housing land supply. We're taking into account a site that, as you saw today on site, you'll have your opinion on the merits of that site and whether the best way of restoring that site may be through sensitive and high quality development. So this application is presented to members as a departure from the plan, which is something that is something that's allowed under planning law. So we're not relying on a settlement hierarchy here. The report sets out the relative sustainability in locational terms, but also, as I say, it is presented on a departure from the local plan. In terms of the question on the PIP, as members will note, this is for up to 17 dwellings, so that takes it above the number a PIP could be used for.
Thank you, Carl. Do you want to say anything about the category village? Unless you covered that, I think
it's been covered. Yeah, I mean, sorry, just to confirm, I think it is category 4, so it wouldn't normally be one that we direct development to. So it's, as Carl mentioned, that's why it's a departure from that policy, but it's weighing up the other factors, which is being sort of set out in the report, and that's why it's been deemed a recommendation for approval. So hopefully that helps. Thank you.
Councillor Gooch, followed by Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, having seen the site this morning, I mean, it's a tip, literally. It's full of fly-tipped builder's waste, and it's got no value at all in its current state. So allowing some form of development there would be beneficial. I do share the concerns of those who think that 17 houses there is too many. I would prefer development that was in keeping with the other houses along that particular stretch of road. But I also appreciate that the developer has to make money, and reducing the density may not necessarily achieve that. So I would be happy to propose approval of this outline, but I think we will need to look at it carefully when the reserved matters come back.
Thank you, Councillor Gooch. Councillor Ward.
I just was going to say the same thing, so I second both Councillor Dawes' point and Councillor Gooch's point.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. Any more comments? No, thank you. We have a proposal from Councillor Gooch, seconded by Councillor Ward. Heather, can you sum up, please?
Thank you, Chair. So the motion is to approve in line with the officer recommendation in the report, but there has been a request to bring the matter back at reserved matters stage. So those in favour... Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon.
Can I just clarify that? I think it was proposed by Councillor Dawes and seconded by Councillor... Sorry, I apologise.
Spoke, but he didn't propose.
I've got, according to my notes, I've got Councillor Gooch who proposed, and then yourself seconded it. Anyway, if we could move to the vote, then please, those in favour.
Sorry, could I just confirm that's with it'll bring it back to third matters?
Yes, I mentioned that.
I'm not departure from our scheme of delegation.
That would be a departure from the scheme of delegation, but I've mentioned it in the motion, subject to obviously us looking at that. Do you want to just...
I think the point is it might come in and it might be a really good scheme, much lower density, and it might be acceptable. So actually you know, so it is. But absolutely, the normal referral would be relevant in that sense.
So I think we've noted it for the preference that obviously members would like it to come back if it's similar, but if it is in line, perhaps that's then a discussion with the ward member, and it may well be that it's acceptable and it can just be dealt with then by officers. So if everybody's happy, so we're voting for approval in line with the officer recommendation that's in the report. Those in favour? Those against? That motion's carried, Chair. That's 11 in favour, 1 against. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for speaking. I'm sorry, you should have gone back to your seat, but I'm sorry about that. The afternoon is progressing, but thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Would you like to put your microphone off? Is that all right? Thank you. If you can, you're welcome to stay for the last item. If otherwise, I don't. You're happy we move on to the last item? You don't want a break? No, fine. Council number 11, which is application 25/00442. This is land at Evesham Road, Harvington, and this is a PIP. Proposed up to 9 dwellings. We have some speakers. We have Councillor Jill Smith from Harvington Parish Council, Mr. Michael Berrien, and hopefully Miss Jane Cashmore and Mr. Adrian Brosser. I think we're missing somebody, are we? We're just going to get... So if you can hold on a second. You're speaking supporters together, are you? So you understand you have 3 minutes between you, so you'll be taking the time. So you don't get a look in then? No. Fine. That's fine. We'll just hang on a second for the other speaker if he's... What's he going for? How's he going? Okay. Well, hang on a second, shall we? Is Paul coming back? He's coming back. His glasses are still there. There we are. Who's who? It's Councillor Jill Smith. That's yours. Is that... You're in the front row again. Or if you haven't been here already. And Mr. Michael Byrne, if you sit in the middle there, is that all right? So, and Craig, do you want to sit in the hot seat over there, where it says non-committee members? And thank you for coming. Thank you all for coming. All right, I think you're all right with that. I shouldn't worry about your name, Toby. We all know you. No, that's fine. Thank you. We'll plug on with this application. The planning officer, I think Carl Brace is doing this, so over to you, Carl.
Thank you, Chair. I'm presenting on behalf of the Planning Department and Case Officer Gillian McDermott, and thank you all for preparing the comprehensive report before you. The proposal is a planning in principle for up to 9 dwellings. Members are respectfully reminded with regards to assessing a PIP, the scope for assessment is strictly limited to the issues of location, land use and the amount of development. The site is at Harvington, which is north of Evesham. Harvington is defined as a Category 2 settlement in the SWDP and has a first school, village hall, church, public houses, convenience school and play area amongst its other facilities. The site is an undeveloped greenfield site comprising agricultural land and is 0.78 hectares in extent. For the size of the site and going forward, mindful of technical details consent stage, policy SWDP requires 20% green infrastructure to be provided, which would mean that the net developable area would amount to 0.62 hectares, and that would equate to a density of 17.7 dwellings per hectare. The site is outside, however, adjacent to the settlement boundary of Harvington, as you can see on the plan before you. In location terms and having regards to the Council's housing land supply position, this is considered a sustainable location and accordingly, in officer's opinion, inarguably acceptable in locational terms. Considering heritage, furthermore, given the site is well outside and separated from the conservation area, highlighted in green on the plan before members, and is not in flood zone 3 as defined by the Environment Agency, the proposed land use is again acceptable in principle. The relationship of the site is shown before members in its context with regards to existing adjoining residential development, and the red circles show a number of bus stops. These matters are all an example of the locational acceptability and highlight the sustainability of the site in location terms. Whilst illustrative only, the plan shows how development could be brought forward. The density of development, when taken into account SWDP 5 requirement, is of 17.7 dwellings per hectare, which is lower than the recommended standard. Although due to the location on the edge of the village and its gateway nature, this is considered acceptable. A high quality development in response to context should be expected at the TDC stage if the PIP was to be granted today. And this, of course, will then need to meet and satisfy various design and context requirements of both the NDP and our local plan. The Neighbourhood Development Plan was adopted in February 2025, and the application site is not allocated with the development within it. However, there are no allocations within the NDP itself. The NDP identifies around 40 dwellings are supported during the lifetime of its plan to be achieved through the implementation of sites with planning permission, further windfall development, and if required, rural exception sites. The updated background paper for the SWDP review reports that Harvington's housing requirement for the period 2021 to 2041 is 51 dwellings. As there are no housing allocations in the NDP, paragraph 14b of the MPPF is not met and does not apply in this case. The Council, as we are well aware, cannot demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, and paragraph 11, as you are again well aware, is engaged along with the tilted balance. Accordingly, and given the strict areas consideration for a PIP, namely location, land use and amount of development, officers consider there is no credible grounds to resist this sustainable development proposal as set out in the report, and approval is recommended. Members are also reminded in regards to a PIP, conditions cannot be added to any decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jill Smith, you have 3 minutes. Thank you. Oh, just press the one, press it in front of you. Oh.
Does it stay on?
Yes.
Okay, right. Harvington Parish Council and the residents of Harvington have been committed to the production of a neighbourhood development plan. This process started in 2015 and has involved 1,530 hours of work done by volunteers who care passionately about the local area. The Harvington plan was submitted to a village referendum on the 25th of July 2019. It was passed by 87% in a turnout of 47%. This shows significant support and commitment by the residents of Harvington for the neighbourhood development plan. Having been accepted in the village referendum, the plan was adopted by Wychavon District Council at its meeting on the 18th of September 2019. The plan has recently been reviewed, which started in 2022, and at the council meeting on the 26th of February this year, Wychavon District Council adopted the neighbourhood plan review, and it now forms part of the development plan for Wychavon District. Harvington has provided, through site allocations, 35 houses built at Meadow Rise, 9 houses at Bromley Close and 4 houses at Copper Beach, making 48 in total towards the local housing supply. The 9 houses were the only allocation for Harvington in the South Worcestershire Development Plan. The proposed housing development not only exceeds our required allocation, but is adding to the ribbon development outside the development boundary. Harvington does not have a site allocation in the emerging South Worcestershire Development Plan, as we are a Category 2 village. The site allocation in the original Harvington plan was removed by the examiner in the recent review as it had been built out and could not be classed as an allocation. This caused great consternation as we have done the right thing by providing houses in an efficient and timely manner, and as a result we are being penalised. Harvington Parish Council are currently reviewing the Neighbourhood Development Plan again in order to rectify this situation and fulfil the criteria of the emerging South Worcestershire Development Plan. We ask the Planning Committee to allow us time to go through proper consultation with the residents of Harvington. The Parish Council will put out a call for sites and undertake housing needs survey and other data collection. Ultimately, this will allow the democratic process of creating a new plan to be achieved. The development boundary, as laid down in the current Neighbourhood Development Plan, should be adhered to as it is part of Wychavon's own development plan. I rest my case.
Thank you very much. Mr. Michael Bowen, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak at this planning committee meeting. I, along with various other residents, have previously responded in objection to this planning application. I don't intend to take anything away from what they have said, but I did want to highlight a number of key concerns. I believe the crux of the applicant's argument for approval, and indeed the crux of the planning decision, is whether the requirement for a government-mandated 5-year housing supply should be allowed to trump local planning policies, the Neighbourhood Development Plan, environmental safeguards, and the wishes of Harvington residents negatively affected by the development. That is to say, to permit a development that would otherwise be unlikely to receive an approval. However, I believe a key consideration in your decision must also be the wider impact for Harvington of granting an approval under these circumstances. For example, and with reference to the recent Planning Committee report for this application of the 6th of May, I feel that insufficient consideration has so far been given to the projecting nature of the site beyond the western development boundary and the precedent that an approval would set for encouraging further adjacent infill development to the northwest and southeast. This is particularly critical if local planning policies, and particularly those of the Harvington Neighbourhood Plan, are essentially to be disregarded in order to meet the 5-year housing supply edict. In respect of housing supply, whilst Wychavon has yet to allocate its 5-year quota, it can currently demonstrate a 1.1-year supply, not zero supply. And although the tilted balance is triggered, it does not mandate that an approval decision has to be given. It should also be noted that the Parish Council have previously stated that Harvington can meet the remainder of its housing allocation through windfall developments. Given the above and the sensitive nature of the application site, the planning restrictions which would otherwise resist its development, and the fact that development opportunities on existing brownfield sites are available to create housing, a decision in favour of the application would seem to represent a short-sighted drive to fulfil a 5-year housing supply at the expense of considered long-term local planning. It also effectively removes local residents and parish councils from the decision-making process and undermines the previous trust placed in local authorities to protect the environment where they live. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jane Cashmore, I think you have 3 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm the agent for the application. Permission in principle is sought for 9 dwellings to be sited adjacent the development boundary of Harvington. A PIP has a restricted scope for assessment of location, land use and amount of development. We recognise the neighbourhood plan has recently been updated, but as the Council's policy team sets out, there are no allocations in the neighbourhood plan that address the outlined housing requirement, and therefore paragraph 14 of the NPPF is not engaged. The Council's 1.1-year housing land supply means the NPPF paragraph 11 tilted balance is engaged. This means permission should be granted unless any adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits when assessed against the policies in the framework taken as a whole, having particular regard to key policies for directing development to sustainable locations, making effective use of land, securing well-designed places and providing affordable homes, individually or in combination. Mindful that the factors to consider in a PIP are limited, I draw your attention to the following benefits of the development carrying positive weight. Firstly, with regards directing development to sustainable locations, the site lies within walking distance by pavement to bus stops, local facilities and amenities. Your officer states the location is suitable for residential development in terms of the development plan strategy and promoting use of sustainable transport options in accordance with SWDP 4. Secondly, up to 9 dwellings is an effective use of land. It balances delivering much needed housing along with respecting the edge of settlement location, green infrastructure requirements and designing a development to take account of relevant views in the neighbourhood plan. Thirdly, the development would provide a policy compliant level of affordable housing. Fourthly, paragraph 73 of the NPPF recognises small and medium-sized sites can make an important contribution to meeting the housing requirement of an area, as they are often built out relatively quickly. Fifthly, the development would also support local services, and the development would also support economic growth both in the short and long term. The factors within scope for assessment of this PIP are acceptable. Your officer at paragraph 7.3 says the location is suitable for residential development. At 7.4 says in terms of land use, the proposed land use in principle is considered acceptable. And at 7.5 says the amount of development is likely to be appropriate with final numbers known as part of technical details consent. We acknowledge the site is outside the development boundary, but there are no adverse impacts which would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits, and your officer concludes the proposal represents sustainable development. Therefore, I hope you're able to support your officer's reasoned recommendation to approve. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. The local board member is Councillor Craig Reeves. Craig, have you any points you want clarifying from the speakers? No, thank you. The rest of the committee have any points you want clarifying at all? Councillor Dorks, followed by Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Chair. To the planning officer, it sounds like we're going out against a neighbourhood plan, which is just sacrilege. But as I see it, the problem is the neighbourhood plan has missed out on planning any development. Is that basically what the problem is?
That's correct. And at face value to the community, it feels perverse because you've just gone through a neighbourhood plan process and then you've had an allocation removed by the plan inspector, which obviously that's nothing to do with us, that's an independent process. And then that has effectively left you exposed to NPPS paragraph 4B. I had this situation when I was a planning officer in Herefordshire at Ledbury, where we had significant sites totaling hundreds of houses removed by a plan inspector from memory, that left Ledbury with no allocated site. So again, going back 10 years or whatever it was, susceptible to this sort of situation when Herefordshire had a below 5-year housing land supply. So you have my, just from a planning point of view, you have my absolute sympathy because you've tried to do everything right and you've been undermined by a process. But ultimately, the NPPF is very clear, that policy is very clear on how then that applies in this scenario. So unfortunately, paragraph 11 is then engaged, and then the provisions of the PIP that we've gone through, this means this site, to say, my professional recommendation as set out in the report, stands basically.
Thank you.
Councillor Morris, followed by Councillor Dyke.
Yeah, that sort of half answered my question, but the other thing is, am I not right in thinking until the inspection is completed, it's not a done deal? Or am I misunderstanding? So okay, the allocation's been taken out, but don't we have to wait till it's published for it to become something that we've got to take account of?
Well, the matter's been run through our policy team and they've confirmed the position to us in terms of consulting on this particular point, that with the current situation, paragraph 14B is engaged. So it's proceeding on the basis that there isn't an allocation.
if we were to defer something like this and they then get a chance to do that, does that then not?
That's going to be a very long process, and ultimately whatever circumstances, we have to make decisions in the moment we are in. Planning's dynamic, so things can change significantly one way they're in all sorts of contexts, but that process would not be a short process. So this is an application that my recommendation to committee is to determine in time, basically.
Okay, just one final point to clarify. So I'm looking at policy DB1 of the neighbourhood plan, which says that it can't happen outside the development boundary, but we have to ignore that because of what's happened to the allocation.
Well, technically we don't ignore it in the same way we don't ignore the settlement boundaries in our local plan, because there is that conflict. However, paragraph 11 is engaged because of the housing land supply, so the weight given to the settlement boundary falls away, and then we're back in that planning balance, sustainable location, sustainable development. So it is outside the settlement boundary, so there is a conflict with the development plan. However, because paragraph 14b is engaged, is not complied with, and then paragraph 11 kicks in, the weight we give to the settlement boundary falls away, basically. So we're then assessing things on their sustainability. So as you can see from the plan, just as, because this is what we're talking about, that site is clearly adjacent to the settlement boundary, the defined settlement boundary of the settlement. As you've seen from the slides and from various oral presentations and in the report, it's within, has a good relationship with a number of key facilities in that village. So in that context, and again, this is a PIP, so under the very, very strict focus parameters we have, there's to me as a planning officer no credible reason to resist the proposal in the context of both the PIP and with our housing land supply position engaged in terms of the MPPF.
Councillor Dyke, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, can you go on a couple of slides till you get the one with the star and the circles? That one. Now, where the star is, that looks like it's quite manicured. Somebody's cut the grass or whatever. What is it now? What's it being used as now?
Yes, you could answer that one.
Sorry. So currently that piece of land is owned by the house at the very bottom corner. Its planning history, at one point it was turned into a paddock. It's currently essentially a wild meadow, and it is partially manicured, so they will mow it every so often. They've also planted various trees on it at various points, notably at the bottom corner and out to the far left-hand corner. So it is looked after. It's not completely let grow wild.
Thank you. Any more points you want clarifying? No? Okay, thank you very much. Those were three really good speakers. They're probably the best of the afternoon, you'll be glad to hear. So would you like to return to your seats? Thank you. Ask the Councillor Reeves if you want to address this committee once they've sat down.
Hello. Thank you for taking the time to review this application. I bring the application here today because of the strength of the objection from Harvington Parish Council, as well as the number of objections by Harvington residents, but also because it shines a light not on Harvington's neighbourhood plan, but very brightly through it. The local plan, instigated by referendum, that has been produced not only at a financial cost to the village, but with endless hours of voluntary dedicated work, a plan that Wychavon encouraged and a plan that this council adopted back in February this year. However, in that same week in February, this application came to the table, and despite the location of this development being outside of the plan's development boundary, it is now being recommended for approval. As we have heard, the application highlights that due to there being no housing allocation present within the plan, we default to the rhetoric, we need to build more houses to fulfil our needs. So why did the inspector request for the allocation to be removed from the review? Well, as we have heard, Harvington, with foresight, built out their allocation and as a result are now being penalised. They don't have an allocation because they built it. People are living in them. Had they not have instigated the building of said allocation with haste, their boundary would hold weight. may be a lesson to be learned for any would-be village thinking about creating a plan. I please urge this council to work with all neighbourhood plans to ensure that with foresight our plans are protected from future occurrences such as this. Now, for balance, the application, with it contravening the development boundary to one side, does have support by a number of residents, and I agree a considerate developer proposing a handful of properties is far better solution to the village growth than that of a large-scale building giant expanding the village by 40 to 50 houses at each iteration. But it goes without saying that should this be approved, it sets a precedent for other applications to come to the table. And I urge a discussion between Harvington Parish and Wychavon to find a way to work with the applicant to include this potential build as part of the future allocation in the what will be newly reviewed plan, if that can happen. No village who works this hard to obtain and retain a neighbourhood plan should ever be in this situation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Reeves. Some good points there. Councillor Morris, open it to a debate for everybody. Councillor Morris?
Well, I'm going to 100% agree with Councillor Reeves on that one. It's appalling that this can happen, but I'm listening to what's being said, and it sounds like we haven't actually got any option. So think about it pragmatically. Just because you grant a PIP doesn't mean it has to happen. And maybe in the meantime, if other sites come forward and there are other reasons why this can ultimately be rejected, maybe that is the only possible way forward. I don't know.
Thank you. Councillor Middlebury.
Thank you, Chairman. A few moments ago, you said that the three speakers were the best speakers we'd had this afternoon. Can I just say that...
Outside the committee members,
yes,
I hate to say.
Well, I'm going to say that what Councillor Reeves has described to us this afternoon in the way he did it, he was by far the best of the councillors who were sat.
Well, but I haven't dismissed him to the back benches, so you're still there. But I take the point. I'll include you, Councillor Reeves, otherwise I'll get into real trouble.
Yes. Well, I'm not including the others. And anyway, I think the solution that he's got, if we were to pass this today, to encourage the developers to work within the neighbourhood plan improvement is the way forward. I can't actually see how we can turn the PIP down in itself with the three conditions. But if we can put a condition, well, it can't really be a condition, but they've got to come back with some detailed plans in the future, so it would be very helpful for them to have actually shown that they are working within the community in a very constructive way. So if there's some way of building my words, which aren't as good as Councillor Reeves, into approval, I would move the recommendation of the officers.
Thank you, Councillor. Well spoken. Councillor Dawes, followed by Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Chair. It's a very sad day that we've got to do this, but there is no way that we can refuse this. It is one of the most sustainable developments we've had come past us for a long time. I mean, there are a lot of amenities in that village, and I can't see how it can really adversely affect any of the population that's already there. The owner is the person next door it's going to affect the most. So, yeah, I will second that motion.
Thank you very much, Councillor Morris. You don't want to say anything. Have we any other comments? No, thank you. Well, we have a... Sorry, do you want to say anything?
Just so there is absolutely no misunderstanding for councillors, if you grant this PIP, it can't be revoked. It may be that you turn down the technical details, and that can happen, but please be under no misunderstanding that through the NDP being reviewed or updated or whatever, that this permission would fall away. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think probably we'll come to a vote now. We have a proposal from Councillor Middlebury, seconded by Councillor Dawes. Over to you, Heather. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So if we can move to the vote, the motion is for approval. Those in favour, please, if you can raise your voting cards. That's unanimous, Chair.
Well, thank you, everybody, and thank you, speakers, for coming. Thank you for turning up, especially Councillor Morris. Have you got a lift back all right? Okay, thank you very much.